Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney from London as we discuss the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets with last generation meta avatars. We're using hand tracking with built-in microphones. And thank you to our patrons out there for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. That's XR Developer News, Podum, the developer of Smash Drums, HoloNet, Mike Manzano, and Richard Meller. And hello to all of our commenters out there. I see we've got a Michael Jackson out there in the comments, Ryan B., Arlen tuning in, John Parma, John, and Biggs. Thank you all for tuning in. David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's a very dense show today. We have a lot of big topics to get into. My notes are larger than almost ever. So we don't really have many sections this week. It's all going to be a lot of different news for the most part. We'll first talk about Samsung's headset, the report that suggests when it might launch, that also hints that it could have a very high price. We will then talk about Niantic selling off most of their games business, including Pokemon Go, to Saudi Arabia to fund a new venture within their business, a spatial AI transition, as Ian put it in his headline. We will then have a section of Quest developer news. We will talk about Golf Plus testing tracking your real life putter using Logitech's MX Ink stylus. We will talk about the fact that major developers are already using Quest's Passthrough API, and at GDC this week, we should find out more. Next week, I should say, we should find out more. Then we'll talk about MAGE. We don't normally talk about games on this show. We have Gamescast on Tuesday when we talk about games, but we'll be talking specifically about a Quest game that was made using a custom engine. The developer didn't use Unity, Unreal, or Godot. They developed their own engine and their own physics solver to achieve 120 FPS physics with dynamic shadows on Quest 3. Then we will talk about the update to the OpenXR saga from last week, the news that Meta will recommend very soon, either today or tomorrow, according to Meta, using Unity and Unreal's built-in OpenXR support. Then we will talk about Meta indicating that suppliers, based on the reception of the Orion demo of AR glasses at Connect, are now heavily pursuing producing the wonder material, silicon carbide, that makes it possible. Well, it's field of view possible, to be specific. We'll then talk about Immersed. Its Visor is delayed again. They now say mass production will begin after summer. Then we'll talk about VRChat. It is an update where they're testing drones, dolly cams, and a desktop webcam mode. A lot of creator camera tools there coming to VRChat. We will then talk a little bit about Mark Gurman's hint of visionOS 3. So that's Bloomberg's Mark Gurman suggesting that it will be a feature-packed release. Then we'll talk about Google. Google is in the final stages of acquiring an ultra-low power eye tracking startup that it could use for lower cost and lower energy eye tracking in headsets and glasses. Finally, our final section of the show, we will talk about wireless PC VR. 3 stories there. Firstly, strong indications that Valve's Steam Link app is coming to Pico and HTC Vive standalone headsets. Then our 2 main topics within that section. Firstly, D-Link's VR AirBridge, that wireless PC VR dongle that was designed for Quest 2 and endorsed by Meta, no longer works in Windows 11 24H2, the latest major update for Windows 11. And you may remember that version name because it's also the same Windows 11 version that killed all the Windows MR headsets. Finally, we'll talk about the data mining that suggests that Valve is working on a SteamVR Link dongle for reliable wireless PC VR. So Valve could be coming up with their own take on the VR AirBridge specifically designed for SteamVR.
Yeah, what a show. Hope you all had fun with Kyle last week. This is going to be a very meaty episode as David and I go back and forth covering this news. I see a lot of the places being set, like the places being set for the rest of the year by all of these companies in this news. news week this week. Onikaze's hello out there. LL saying that they're watching us live. So cool. Thank you for tuning into us live, and all you time travelers out there catching up to us at 2x speed or 1.5x speed. I'm sorry for you, and I wish you the best on that journey. Catching up to us, and all of our silent viewers out there, shout out to you. Thank you for listening and watching us out there. So let's move right through this on Samsung's headset in Q3. What is the supposed price here that they're talking about?
Yeah, so last week with Kyle, you remember we talked about that report from a South Korean outlet that indicated that Samsung headset would use Sony's new micro OLED displays, the same that it's using in its upcoming standalone headset, Sony's. And those have slightly higher resolution and wider color gamut than Apple Vision Pro's Sony micro OLEDs. And they also seem to have a more square aspect ratio, suggesting that Samsung's headset may not have the same restricted vertical field of view as Apple's headset. So that was last week's news. Now we have more Samsung news from a different South Korean news outlet, Business Post. And their report suggests that Samsung will launch its headset in Q3 of this year. So that's July, August, or September. And the interesting part of this report is that it says that according to their industry sources, the production target is only 100,000 headsets per year. So while this report itself doesn't suggest a specific price, that production target would. Because obviously, if you can only make a small number of something, you need to balance out demand, and as any business would, increase the price. So Apple Vision Pro has been widely reported as having a production scale of 500,000 units per year, and it's priced at $3,500. This thing, according to this report, assuming it's true, which it may not be, according to this report, this thing is going to have a production scale 1/5 of Apple Vision Pro. If this is true, and I want to say that again because this is a report, this is not confirmed, this suggests that this really is just Samsung and Google's sort of experiment, their foot in the water. You could almost argue a developer kit. If this thing is going to come out and be on the order of, $3,000, $4,000, or perhaps even just, $2,500, that kind of range, that's speculation on my part, but I don't think this is in any way remotely a mass market product if that report is true.
Yeah, so there's very interesting things to think about here, particularly in the area of buying supply for future generations of headset. I think about this, some of the stuff that Mark Zuckerberg has sort of indicated. I think he commented something like they spent all their money on that display. He sort of indicated that, and what the hint there is to me is that like Apple paid for a certain amount of supply from that supplier, and everyone else has to get in line after them. Well, this looks to me like Samsung has gotten the next supply of the next generation display, but it's going to be facing the same problems Apple has, which is building up production of that particular type of display.
Yes, certainly. There are just no indications that Sony has the will to dramatically scale up its micro OLED business at this point. Interestingly, of course, there is another company that's making 4K micro OLEDs that are going into, Play for Dream, potentially Immersed Visor, we'll talk about later. Shiftal's Megane X and Pimax for Dream Air says it's actually considering between Sony's and BOE's. And we don't know, I guess, what is the scale of that too. What we do know about whether it's BOE's 4K micro OLEDs or Sony's, they are still very expensive and relatively low scale. We haven't seen any product actually release that's under $2,000, significantly under $2,000 that includes these. The reports that we've seen from the supply chain suggest that when you're talking about these kind of headsets, these displays alone, like a pair of them, cost more than an entire Quest 3. And that's still the situation we're in. The yield is still reportedly low for these companies. Apple was apparently a year ago evaluating BOE's displays and found that the quality wasn't up to their standards. So there may be, some of these displays are coming out with, dead pixels or color variances or things like that. No company, as far as we can tell, has yet cracked how do you affordably with high yield mass produce these micro OLEDs. And until then, you're going to see these headsets that do try to have 4K micro OLED come out at this high price and small scale. And Meta, in the meantime, is just saying we're not interested yet. If you can't sell this thing for $500 or less, we don't care. But the problem with that is, of course, if you want to do virtual screens, right? I always talk about Apple Vision Pro. It turns screens into software. It can just about replace some physical screens for some use cases. You need 4K per eye resolution realistically. Even that only gets you to like the angular resolution equivalent of the iPad 1, right? A typical viewing distance. Some people, say, do we really need these displays? Yeah, like that's the bare minimum. Realistically, if you wanted to replace like 4K monitors in real life, you would need like 8K per eye headsets. Unfortunately, we're just in a world where you can't get that at scale yet.
Guy just decided to pop up. Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop, talking about working in VR. Oh, here we go again. He's a skeptic out there that long-term work in VR is a thing. He's mentioned it a couple times on our show. The 4K the Apple Vision Pro display is enough for me. Like I'm able to do my work in there, and it's preferable in many instances to work in the headset because of the lack of distraction, but also just I can put things exactly where I want around me. So, Psycho out there is saying they're doing it right now. And please defend us. If there's any other people who prefer to work in VR or get their work done, let them know. I'm convinced that there is a whole trove of Apple Vision Pro owners out there who are quietly getting their work done in VR more and more and more. It's part of my story over the last year, David, is I've had to rearrange everything in my life to try to actually do my work inside that headset. And it's not easy, right? Like there's so many hoops to jump through to get all of your existing content into a headset, whether it's Apple Vision Pro or Quest. It's still a lot of work to kind of like make it easier for you to work in headset than it is on a flat screen.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the range of opinions on this. It's clearly different for everyone because we have one commenter in here saying that even on Quest 3, they enjoy doing this kind of virtual productivity. And that's only obviously a 2K per eye LCD headset. So for some people, they were doing this years ago from, Oculus Go and the original Rift. For other people, I think for a majority of people that I've demoed to, at least, when you show them virtual screens, Apple Vision Pro with its 4K per eye displays just gets past that barrier where they would say this is actually good enough now. And I'm sure for others, even the Vision Pro and this headset won't be good enough, and they're waiting for 8K per eye. These things, whether it be comfort or visuals, the preferences do change from person to person. For Samsung's headset in particular, though, I'm actually very much so looking forward to getting to try this thing because I think the ergonomics are going to have a significant advantage over Vision Pro, where Vision Pro is kind of optimized for lying down in bed, for putting your head against a chair or on a flight, putting your head back. Samsung's headset goes with this more Quest Elite strap style rear strap. And it also has this open periphery by default. You notice, right? It's not pressing against your face. And in the impressions we've seen so far, no one has gotten to try this for a sustained amount of time, but the initial impressions do suggest that this is a very comfortable headset. It's designed to kind of look like a traditional ski strap style from renders. But if you look at this is a Halo strap. This is a Halo strap with an open periphery. And not many people are really acknowledging that, like, sure, the visor is the design here is clearly a clone of Vision Pro. The external battery is heavily influenced. A lot of Android XR is influenced, but Samsung's design here is dramatically different and will result in different ergonomics and may make it more useful for productivity, for sitting down, not having to have your head leaned back and have your virtual screens in front of you, but less suited for entertainment, watching movies in bed. And that's very interesting to keep an eye on.
Very, very interesting. It was my big point of feedback when I met with Google and with Samsung to try out their headset late last year was that hard strap on the back really affects the use cases. And I saw James in our comments sort of being skeptical that this thing will ship this year. I think that's a very, very interesting idea to explore. We have yet to see anyone else deliver, like anyone else ship as this market has been changing around us, right? It's a very, so I saw someone mention Quest 4, right? It's a big assumption. It's an assumption right now that there will be a Quest 4, that they won't just change the name of the entire product line and go in a different direction. And that whole new direction is Quest compatible with Quest software, assuming you go and get the controllers. But that's the kind of phase we're in right now of how big the shift is when you've got to make a shift from controllers to hand tracking.
Well, I mean, look, whatever they brand it, we have reports from the information that there is a Quest 4 and Quest 4S coming in 2026. Andrew Bosworth, the CTO of Meta, in December, referenced working on the next Quest and the Quest after that, right? So you have, I think we will see a Quest 4 in 2026 as planned, but the commenters here are specifically asking not will there be a Quest 4, they're asking will it have this kind of resolution? Will it have 4K micro OLED? The answer is almost certainly not, unless there is a display maker out there that right now already has come up with a magic technique to bypass everyone else in the world and make super cheap 4K micro OLEDs. That's not going to happen. I think more realistically, I would expect a Quest 4 to be either 2.5K or 3K, that kind of resolution. So Quest 2 effectively was about 1.5K when you take into account that it was smaller sections of a single panel. And then Quest 3 is up at 2K. So I think we'll see sort of another jump again. 2.5K, it would be my bet. 3K if Meta is really going to try and push resolution. We'll have to see how that goes. But we do have obviously those reports that Meta plans in 2027 a codename Puffin headset that will be designed for virtual screens with a tethered puck. And I would imagine if you're going to push resolution, it would be in that kind of headset that is designed specifically around virtual screens rather than, the generalized low-cost Quest headset.
Yeah, so back on the subject of just when will they ship or will they ship, I wanted to point out this made the rounds a lot when this photo went around. Apple has a very similar sort of connection spot on its headset to the cord that goes down to your pocket, but it's arced in such a way, it's pointed up in such a way that it like points back off of the connector, and you don't feel it coming off of the headset at all. You don't feel that pull all the time. Yeah, you can still snag it on various things, but the way this is set up, like I could imagine it yanking or it like constantly feeling the weight of the battery tugging at this little corner right there. And it's cool the way that thing snaps into place on the Vision Pro. It like it sort of feels like an implant or something that you're putting in because of the way it locks into place. My point is, like, there's some team at Apple that spent a long time on just that single feature, and it's an active question whether Samsung is bringing the same effort.
Yeah, I mean, Samsung obviously does stress that this is pre-production hardware that everyone has tried so far. That report suggests production will begin next month, like mass production in April for release in Q3, July, August, or September. So they could be making last minute changes there, but that does look rough. What I really wondered about this headset, and I still wonder, is why do you have both? Why do you have a rear padded strap and an external battery? Surely if you're gonna have all this bulk at the back of your head, this is already too much bulk to lie back on a chair, right? Just put the battery back here like Quest Pro did. The Meta was actually quite innovative in what they did there. They introduced one of the first curved batteries in a consumer product of this type, and I don't see why Samsung couldn't do the same thing. I won't even go there with the Samsung worried about certain things happening to batteries jokes from the Galaxy S7 era, but I guess I did just go there.
Oh, you did go there, and it brought me right back to me being in the middle of the mountains of California and Samsung sending a person out to my rural home to pick up that device from me and take it away at like 5 a.m. They showed up at my door at like both before 6, before dawn, to pick up that hardware and take it away. So yeah, that was a fun little bit of history that I just remembered there. Are we ready to talk about Niantic now?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the image here. If you can find it, you go ahead and cast it up, but you take it away here because this is certainly a very interesting one. Selling off Pokemon Go and their other big IPs, Pikmin, Bloom, and Monster Hunter Now. That is certainly a big story.
Yeah, so some of the numbers here were fairly interesting. So Niantic is now basically two efforts, one owned by Saudi Arabia and the other being going back into startup mode, basically, is the way it's being framed. That's Niantic Spatial, and they are building on their underlying AI-based technologies, the database of imagery that you've scanned into the game, the work that you've been doing as gamers, as players of the game, to help Niantic scan the world and understand the world and make a map of it. That's now in Niantic Spatial. That's the core of their technology platform. And then the game that we all have been playing for the last decade or so is now owned by Saudi Arabia. I pointed out in the article that there's you're making a certain statement to the investment market, to where you want to take your business if you go and take money from that group, if you go take money from Saudi Arabia. So Magic Leap did this uh, years ago. They took a very large amount of money from Saudi Arabia. And then the COVID-19 pandemic came and they couldn't raise another bigger round than the previous one. That's typically how startups go, is they try to build bigger and bigger rounds. If they can't reach a market fit, they try to raise more money. And yeah, Magic Leap was unable to make that transition. Well, what happens to Pokemon Go over the life of it? There's a lot of people that have put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours into collecting their Pokemon, and now it's owned by this other organization than you had when you initially started putting all your time into the game. So it's a different situation, right? This is not a hardware company, or it's not a hardware effort; it's a software effort, and people might think differently about that. But it did affect Magic Leap over the course of its lifespan to take that money and then try to get more money later in a very bad way, and it just didn't work. Um, and I'm just going to mention Neom. Go look up the Neom video. There's a video that they put out there to promote this uh, building project in Saudi Arabia. And there's a video out there showing like them trying to promote this place and it shows this like woman tumbling through space along this giant wall, and that's it, I can't even fathom the marketing hoops that they have to jump through to try to make you want to go visit that place. Um, yeah, and yeah, that and there's a reality to living there in that country that people in the West aren't really familiar with. And I don't know. That's now the owner of your Pokédex. So this is a big thing for us to consider over the long term. I would like another Pokemon game to start playing everywhere.
Yeah, I wonder what this means for the prospect of Pokemon Go coming to eventual AR glasses when those do eventually arrive as consumer products. We always talked on this podcast about the Pokemon test of AR's field of view will be good enough when you can have a Pokemon battle with your friend in the park and see both Pokemon at the same time without having to pan your head up and down just to see them. I wonder, will this new company, Scopely, it's a US company owned by Saudi Arabia, um, will they still be interested in investing that, or are they just going to kind of do the typical mobile game thing of just try to squeeze up the microtransactions, add more ads, and not really care about investing in AR? That's interesting to ask about, what's happening to what's being sold off. The other question is, what are they going to do with the money that they've gotten from this, right? That is a lot of money, billions of dollars that they now have to invest in this new Niantic Spatial. And as James O'Loughlin brings up in the comments, one of the really interesting products they have today that you can try out on your Quest 3 is Into the Scaniverse. And we talked about it last week, and we talked about it when it came out for WebXR back in November or something like that. If you missed it, yeah, this is on the Quest store now. You can go and find this. And what you can do with this app, and this kind of shows you where Niantic is going as a company, is you get the phone app, Scaniverse, on your iPhone or Android phone or whatever. You can scan scenes as a Gaussian splat with your phone. It runs on device, so it's free. It doesn't go to anyone's server until you upload it. Runs on your phone, the scan gets processed, and then you can send it to your account, pop on your Quest 3, and be in that scanned environment. It's kind of what you can do at much higher quality for a much higher price from Vario Teleport. It's what Meta is promising with Horizon Hyperscape, whenever that comes to actually allow you to generate your own things. I want to be clear that the quality of the background in this is really low. It's really about kind of capturing a moment and an object in front of you, with the background being just kind of a setting. But it's really, really cool, and you should go try this out. And it really shows you what they're trying to do at Niantic now. It's about this, as they say, geospatial AI, AR stuff.
So one thing on the money I was thinking about is I imagine a lot of that money is just cashing out the investors. So there is an amount of, like, I think it was 50 million that they said that they were starting up Niantic Spatial with from this whole thing, and there's also an investment from this new venture back into spatial. So they're trying to act like everyone is going to work together. There's going to be a transitional period where nothing's going to change, but ultimately we'll probably feel some of these things over time. One of the things that, for example, that I love is these physical events, these physical Pokemon events that you can go to. They're held in various cities around the world, right? What happens when the next one is hosted in Saudi Arabia, right, instead of Western nations? So that's, I don't know. Aaron is saying he's watching us from Antarctica. I'd like to see a photo of that if that's true. But that is cool. If you are watching out there, send us an email to tips@uploadvr.com if you're watching us from Antarctica or another weird location. I'd love to see that. Anything else?
The interesting thing is that, as far as I can tell from reading their statements around this, it will still be this remaining company, Niantic Spatial, that is powering those sort of real-world events, because their primary product, Into the Scaniverse, I brought up because it's cool for us VR headset users, but their primary product is this thing called a VPS. So you know what a GPS is? Yeah, you have these satellite signals that are used by your phone to triangulate its position on the globe, but GPS has relatively limited accuracy in cities and indoors, right? If you're near these giant metal objects that are distorting the signal from GPS, it doesn't work. You'll know if you've ever tried to use Google Maps in a city with a bunch of skyscrapers around you. It sucks. So VPS uses your phone camera to do visual positioning, a visual positioning system. It uses computer vision to figure out where am I in the world by comparing it to a huge data set of phone images that they have from people using their phone all over the world, right? So that's how Pokemon Go's positioning for these events is powered. That's how developers using this SDK, which exists today, works. And it's what eventual AR glasses will need, right? You'll need to be able to say, where exactly am I in the world? You need a global VPS that, from taking in camera imagery from your first-person view, can get within centimeter accuracy your position on the planet. It is going to be, for AR, as profound as GPS was for smartphones, and that's their core product, this VPS that they've been making. And Pokemon Go has been, as far as I'm aware, used to train up this giant system that they developed, and it shows you the real value was never in Pikachu, it was in knowing where the Pokestops are.
Well, that's fascinating. So a couple things there. I scanned a Pokestop that got put near my apartment back in Arkansas, and I ended up getting gamified to go scan that Pokestop again and again and again, and it was like playground equipment that I'm scanning for them, and I was rewarded for putting in that effort. More recently, Pokemon Go added this really interesting feature, and I've pointed this out on previous shows. You can go on routes with other people, and if you imagine you and I both playing Pokemon Go together, you over there with a Pixel phone from Google and me with an iPhone from Apple, and we're walking together down a roadway on this route that has been predefined by their map, right? What Niantic Spatial now gets out of you and I walking together on that route is a corrected path for all of that mistake, all of the GPS that's failing. They get a corrected path, and they get to see the differences in GPS quality between the two types of popular phones. No one else has access to that kind of data. Only maybe Google Maps has ever gotten close to there, where you go and install Google Maps on your phone. But how do you get a situation where two people have Google Maps out, right, on an iPhone and an Android, and you get that stream of data. Well, that's something Niantic has special to them.
Yeah, Niantic claims that its VPS is actually more widespread in terms of the areas it can cover than Google Maps, because Google Maps is mainly trained off Street View data. But if you're off indoors, for example, or in a park where there's no Street View data, Niantic having all of these Pokemon players and Ingress before that and all of this data means that they can actually have a sort of more robust VPS. So they're hoping that this SDK is going to power the kind of next generation of apps that take on the idea of Pokemon and eventually on AR glasses as well. So that's very interesting to see whether they can pull that off.
So before we transition off of this, I've seen this question hinted at a couple times in our comments, but Dave is asking, why are they selling Pokemon Go if that was what they needed to train their model? Well, I hinted at it when I said I want a new Pokemon game. I hinted on a previous episode that that like Niantic should make a system where you go around your house scanning your house. And then, what was it? The game was a little Land of the Giants. Imagine a Land of the Giants VR game where you have to go scan your whole house. And once you scan your house, then the little people that are hiding in your walls pop out and they show up hiding under a table or something. But they can't show up until you scan your whole house. That's the way Niantic has gamified a lot of their stuff. And we need that around the house. Like we need that type of scanning to make some of the gameplay work that we really want out of mixed reality or spatial computing. We need really, really nice home scans to allow this gameplay to live inside of our environment. And I want a Pokemon game that has battling against you on the other side of the planet and doesn't require me to walk outside. It needs a whole new game. We've got Nintendo about to launch Switch 2, and we've got I think there's opportunity for a new Pokemon game that fulfills needs, and I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that pop up in the next year or two.
I mean, I think it's unlikely that Niantic is going to do that. If they've just sold off Pokemon, I don't think Nintendo is going to license out the IP to another mobile game that does the exact same thing. I think Scopely is going to have that. But to directly address Dave's question, they asked, why are they selling Pokemon Go if it was what they needed? What I wonder is, do they still get the data, right? Their technology is still going to be powering this, right? Scopely is only getting the game, the kind of application layer, the technology layer, the backend that's doing this visual positioning system, and all of the kind of geospatial API stuff that's actually making Pokemon Go possible, as far as I can tell, and I may be reading it wrong, is still under Niantic Spatial. So it's a really weird situation, but it's almost like they're saying, you do the game part, we'll do the tech part. And then they still get the data and they get the best of both worlds, because they say that the potential to focus on this and then get, a dozen different games that do this exact same thing, and then eventually on AR glasses, of course, is bigger than one game. But I mean, we don't know exactly what the reasons for this are. And as you say, it could be more about the desires of investors in any specific strategic direction.
Yeah, I mean, just think about the dwindling, the dwindling state of app stores, right? The fact that monopolies are being torn away there, and I don't know, that 30% is becoming questionable. There's all sorts of things that can fit into the calculus. I like T Hammer's comment here saying that's giving up a lot of freedom. I'm not scanning the inside of my house. I disagree with you. I think you just need a game to convince you that it's worth it. And I've got a lot of evidence, this one on the wall being one of them, that all you need is a game mechanic to lure you in and make that seem reasonable to you. And you'll do it. And you'll do it in very large numbers. The question is 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 years after you scan your home, what happens with that library of information and how is it used? So your fear makes sense. Hold it close to you as the next stage of personal computing happens, because it is. I understand your concern, but I also have to point out the reality of game mechanics being used to gather this data.
Just before we move on, a few questions from the audience that are more general about headsets. KC Chiefs Productions asks, should my friend have a Quest 2 is wait to upgrade until the next generation? I think what you're asking is your friend has a Quest 2. Should they wait for Quest 4 or go for Quest 3? That's a very interesting question at this point. So we don't expect that there will be a Quest 4 for another year and a half. So if your friend wants to stay on the Quest 2 for a year and a half, then that's what they need to do. But if they want, in the meantime, mixed reality with color pass-through, if they want pancake lenses with the full Quest 3, not Quest 3S, and if they want, the exclusives like Batman Arkham Shadow, if they want the higher fidelity graphics, then they upgrade to Quest 3. It's really a question of how much do you value those upgrades. I do think, and I've said this before, the upgrade from Quest 2 to Quest 3, the full Quest 3, not 3S, is significant and generational. And I don't think anyone who goes from a Quest 2 to Quest 3 will be disappointed. It's just about, do you think $500 minus whatever you sell your Quest 2 for is worth it for that? And another question in the comments of a similar vein from T Hammer saying, I have a HP Reverb G2. Is it worth getting a Quest 3? I mainly fly and sim race. That's an interesting question, because if you go from Reverb G2 to Quest 3, firstly, you'll be able to update your Windows 11, because if you update to the latest major update, your Reverb G2 will not work anymore. Windows 11, as we will talk about later, kills a couple of things, the new second half 2024 update, and your Windows Mixed Reality headset is one of them. If you go from Reverb G2 to Quest 3, you'll be introducing video compression. It's not a native PC VR headset, so if you don't have an ideal network setup, if you're doing wireless, you could have some issues, as we'll talk about later. You could have some issues with USB compression. That out of the way, the pancake lenses will give you a kind of much clearer and sharper view, even though the resolution is actually ever so slightly less. It's pretty much the same, but it's ever so slightly less. The pancake lenses are a dramatic upgrade. I would say if you do have the money and you're specifically going for flying and sim racing, you may want to look at one of the higher end headsets there. If comfort is your priority, you might want to take a look, if you have the money, for the base stations and everything, at the big screen beyond, or the kind of Pimax Crystal Light or something like that, with the caveats there. It's a really tough question. It's going to depend on how much do you value $500? I think you're somehow muted, even though you're not. You maybe have mashed it so many times. So you just
Can you hear me now?
Or mash mute and unmute about 5 or 6 times while I was speaking.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! I don't know. I broke your system by pressing it too fast.
We're just kind of fidgeting in VR.
Yeah, well, like it's funny. Like some weeks my hand lines up with your mute button just right, and some weeks it doesn't. Oh my gosh! What I was going to say is graphics in the cloud. The idea that you are going to let a server draw your world for you and then beam it to you. It seems like the entire technology industry has bet on this idea that you can go from NVIDIA to OpenAI and see this through line of just everyone betting that we're going to just have, our rendering happening in the cloud. But we're talking about sim people who love to run their graphics locally, right? Like,
these are PC VR gamers with gaming PCs. They're asking this question too.
Yeah, so, and I want to respect both of these audiences, right? That the people that want a PC with a super powered graphics card, and they're trying to find out what year do I buy that graphics card and build the PC around it. And it's a completely different way of thinking about how I'm going to purchase and invite VR into my life than if you're trying to go the other route, which is like, I'm going to go upgrade what you just described, upgrading from Quest 2 to Quest 3. You get $100 back from selling your Quest 2, and then you put that towards your Quest 3, and it's not so expensive. Like, very much Meta is betting on that being the route for a lot of people. But I'm still convinced that the real audience out there, the audience of gamers who love video games and love running their rigs at home, like, they're just they're biding their time trying to figure out, when do I get my graphics card and then when do I get my headset to match that graphics card's abilities? And it's a completely different way of buying and thinking about the market.
Yeah, Danny Roebuck is asking, for PC VR, I'd rather keep my Quest 2 and 500 quid. The thing I would say about Quest 3 over Quest 2, not only are the pancake lenses a lot better, and in PC VR, you're really going to notice that, but the video decoder in the new chipset is better. So in virtual desktop, you can use AV1 and you can use higher bitrate in HEVC. These are the video codecs within it. Also, it has Wi-Fi 6E. Quest 2 is stuck on 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. If you have a modern router with Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7, you can use the 6 gigahertz band if you have a Quest 3. All of these little things come together to make a better PC VR experience on Quest 3. But again, how do you value your $500? Everyone, I think, if it was free, you would obviously jump from Quest 2 to Quest 3. It's just like, what does that money mean to you? And it's going to be a very different answer for each individual person based on their own financial circumstances.
And I don't want to derail us, but remember there was a time when all of these graphics cards, it was around the 2000 generation, the graphics cards came with Virtual Link cable connection. So in theory, you would plug in this thing straight to your headset and you'd be good to go. It only existed for one generation before the graphics cards themselves got redesigned around this cloud computing use case. Like they're made for being used in the cloud largely.
I wouldn't say we lost Virtual Link because of cloud. I think it was because we moved to, instead of native PC headsets, to standalone headsets that were doing wirelessly, right? The reality is the vast majority of people who have a Quest and are using PC VR want wireless. That's what people want. And Mark Zuckerberg said it when PlayStation VR 2 was announced and turned out right. He said, people aren't going to go for wired. That's what all of our market research tells us. I've seen it myself. I have demoed to hundreds of people VR in my time over the past 10 or 15 years, whatever it is now. And before wireless was available, the number one reason people would say if they were talking about whether they'd get one is, whenever it goes wireless. And then a bunch of people that I know did get it when it went wireless. And that obviously happened with the Quest 2 market. So I think that's the shift here. And we'll talk later in the show. That's actually our last topic. I don't want to get too much into this because our big topic at the end is wireless PC VR and how Valve could transform it in certain ways. Are we ready to talk about Quest developer news?
Yeah, we've got a nice little section here on Quest. We've got very active comments. Keep those questions coming. We appreciate them, and we appreciate you. Hit that like button and maybe share this link out to other people who are getting into VR for the first time. I think as you understand it, the way we talk about this, right, we're trying to be understanding of everyone out there who might be getting into this market, and it isn't easy. I think it's interesting. There's more I want to say about the demoing thing. Those people you demo to, right? They're not necessarily the people that are ready to buy a VR headset, right? They're
some of
the people you want to buy a VR headset you're demoing to. It's a different flow if you went to a store and sought the demo yourself.
Sure, yeah, but I'm just saying dozens of people that I have demoed to over the years did buy a headset, and it was when it went standalone and wireless was what pushed most people to do it. For other people, for a few people, it was PlayStation VR 2, but everything I've seen, people really care about wireless.
Those people that did go and buy the headsets, how many of them are regular users, and how many of those headsets ended up being the thing we imagine? They end up collecting dust.
I'd say about 2/3 continue to use them. I think this collecting dust thing, it's a narrative that certain people want to push, but if people buy a headset for a reason, not just like this is a cool thing, if they have a reason, right? If it's because they want to play Walkabout mini golf and they like that idea, if it's because there's a certain shooter they want to play, if it's like in some of our audience because they're a sim racer and they want to upgrade, people, if they buy it for a good reason rather than just this is a cool tech I want to try out, typically they are the kind of people who want to keep using it.
So let's move on to that Quest section, and I just want to say thank you to Meta for the advertising dollars that they gave us. I have a mirroring window up here that began our show, and when the show started, I wanted to mention this. I got a Horizon Worlds ad in VR in my own studio that apparently it's going to get fed right back to us, right? Because it's on our own page. So if any of you had enjoyed that Horizon Worlds ad during this show, that's money coming to us. So I'm thanking them for that. David, let's talk about Quest developer news.
For a second, I wondered what you were talking about there. To be clear, you mean that YouTube played a Horizon Worlds ad
Yes, I've got
on
a
YouTube?
mirror. YouTube played a Horizon Worlds ad
Sure.
for
Okay.
me while inside this studio.
For a second, I thought you were about to empower some of our greatest things to say, look, they just admitted they get paid by Meta. No, YouTube ran an ad or Meta ran an ad on YouTube, which went on our show. Yeah, just to be clear there, I was
I had to
wondering what on
watch an
earth you were
ad.
talking
I had
about.
to watch an ad inside my own show for Horizon Worlds, and I'm not going to not talk about it, right? So I
Sure,
appreciate
sure.
you.
I just want to clarify that was on YouTube. We did not get paid by Meta to run a Horizon Worlds ad. I want to be crystal clear on that. That was a very strange way to say that, Ian.
I'm sorry, and I appreciate it. So Wayne is he apparently saw the ad as well. So
Okay.
so I apologize to you for seeing that ad, and also yeah, thank you for the money.
I was
Bye.
going to say, when did you take this check, and why wasn't I told?
They made me
But
see the ad. Okay, all
okay,
right,
okay.
all right.
Right. Yeah, we're going to talk about four pieces of Quest developer news here. The first one is Golf Plus is testing something that we've seen a few VR developers um, look into now, and that's using Logitech's MX Ink tracked stylus, the $120, $130 stylus that launched um, late last year for Quest 2 and Quest 3. Golf Plus is using it to attach to the top of a real life putter, as you can see here, and you can see here to track your real life putter. So you don't have meta trackers. People have been asking for them, especially VR enthusiasts, for years now, like generic meta trackers. But the Logitech MX Ink, many developers have realized, kind of is that, right? It's in a somewhat strange shape. It's a stylus, right? But it's a lot lighter and a lot more compact than a touch controller. And so all you have to do is make this simple little 3D printed adapter to put on the top of a golf club, and ta-da, you now have tracked putter. So this is something that they don't have a specific timeline for integrating into the app itself, Golf Plus. This is a very popular app, as we talked about. They've sold over 1.5 million copies of this game. They haven't tried it yet with full swing clubs. We don't know whether the tracking's good enough right now. They're only promising that they're working on putters for this, and they don't have a specific timeline. But it's really promising, right? I know a few people who are golfers, and their favorite VR game is Golf Plus. They always want to come and try. If there's a new headset, they're like, "How's the Golf Plus game? Is it better now?" And what they always said to me was, "I really wish this would be able to track my real club." And now that's what they're going to be able to pull off here. So this is a really cool idea. I think a lot of people are going to say Meta just make a Meta tracker, but Andrew Bosworth, the CTO of Meta, has indicated that they do not want to do that. So Logitech is picking up the slack, I guess.
Yeah, so fascinating trade-offs to consider between prediction algorithms that are on the little handheld controllers and potentially precision that is here. I heard of people testing this out, and that is the trade-off. And yes, there's someone exactly talking about that subject in the comments. David predicted it while he was talking. And the thing, I think I talked about this on the Gamescast, so I'll have to repeat it here so Don will remember this. But I've got 4 or 5 tracked accessories in my house right now, a pair of guns, a ping pong paddle, and I just got the Grip to Putter 3 from Walkabout. And the cool thing about the Grip to Putter 3 is it has like a button that you just press to snap it into place. And oh wow, we just got an email from Aaron, and that looks like Antarctica there. So that's cool. Thank you. And it's on the other devices I have, the other tracked objects. I have to get a tool to remove the controller from the thing, and it's a huge pain. I might as well weld the two objects together, this thing. But what's remarkable to me is how great the Quest 3S 3 controller is, that new latest controller is as a tracked object. You on multiple of these things, you turn the object around, you turn the controller around. I mount it to this gun, and now I've actually got access to the analog stick in reverse. I've got access to the face buttons in reverse, and it works as a controller even in a completely reversed position mounted to this object. We're going to have to see what Valve does this year with guarding the evolution of controllers. We've seen some indications that they're going to try to duplicate the controller buttons on a gamepad with their controllers. Well, that's great. Like, you could potentially play every single game on Steam with that kind of setup. But what do you lose when it comes to built for VR controls if they're also doing double duty as a gamepad? And then that's not even considering the tracked object thing. So like the when it doesn't have any buttons on it whatsoever, when it's just a Vive tracker, right? Like, I actually don't think the Vive tracker is super compelling because it doesn't have any physical buttons for you to interact with. It's actually really useful that there's a couple physical buttons to input from on these tracked objects.
Yeah, I mean, the MX Ink has physical buttons on it. You do have that. It does have like squeeze detection and things like that. So it's as well as physical buttons. And developers that I've been hearing experimenting with it say it has really good tracking. You say that a developer suggested that it might prioritize precision over fast movement. So maybe it's not great for really fast movement situations, but you could imagine attaching one of these things onto a gun, and you typically moving like a rifle really fast. Like, you're not kind of going like that with a rifle. It's more of a precision movement. So very interested to see what other developers think. Question from John Birkbeck, a YouTube member, who asks, does this work with the controllers at the same time? Could I track a third object, or does it turn off the controllers? It works at the same time from what I've seen. You certainly have them paired at the same time. And the tracking, in my experience, yes, it does track all three at the same time. So with this, you don't have to clip it out and kind of use it. You could just literally have this constantly attached to your indoor putter used for this one situation. And I really think I think this is the best we're going to get from Meta. I should point out that the company that kind of has done the object trackers that are just kind of simple, low cost infrared LEDs, like the same tech we're talking about here, is Pico, right? And they do have these Pico trackers. They're designed primarily to strap on to your ankles for leg tracking, but they detach and they can be used for generic object tracking. And the really cool thing about Pico's object trackers, and there's a specific mode for this, is that they have USB-C data and power pass-through. So you could build a tracked object, be it a rifle, a tennis racket, whatever, and these handle the tracking. And then through USB-C, you can add your own buttons. So the weapon can have buttons. You can have the squeeze trigger on the rifle that you built send through data to these trackers that then forward it onto the headset. So this is the tracking and the brain and the power for the tracked object. And the tracked object can provide its own buttons and inputs. So really have to commend Pico for doing this. It has led to a lot of people hoping that Meta does the same. These things are really great. They just pop straight out and can become object trackers. And but I want to just say again, Andrew Bosworth, the CTO of Meta, has explicitly said Meta is not going to do this unless Pico trackers or something like it are dramatically successful. Like, if the entire market shifted because of this, he basically said, then sure, Meta would do it. But the essential vibe of that answer was no.
So VR Gamer Dude, Don Hopper out in our audience saying that they would love to play Golf Plus with a real club in my backyard. That would be awesome. Yeah, it would be awesome. But the reason that hasn't happened yet is Quest headsets don't have people detection. So you take that swing and you kill someone, right? Like, you literally could really kill someone with a club that you swing without being able to see the humans in your vicinity. That's like the cart before the horse thing that Meta has done all the way along in its evolution of this platform of how do we get there. And
that's a good point. I just wondered, though, how reliable would it have to be for you to want to? One thing you could imagine is using mixed reality here to kind of have a blend of transparency of the real world. You could even kind of have everything but the very front of the virtual golf course be passed through. There are a lot of potential solutions around that.
And we've got Guy Godin in our comments, and he's saying that we'll hopefully get a tracking API in virtual desktop for these, by the way, and they're just waiting on Pico
trackers.
Yeah. Well, I saw some incredible videos out there of the way people are merging their their actual wheels and their joysticks, their flight sticks with their sim, and they're using virtual desktop for it. So I want to just point out that, like, even when we're talking about all this hardware stuff, right, there's still people that are getting incredibly immersed, incredibly far along in their immersion on today's hardware and today's software, using virtual desktop to merge these worlds in really beautiful ways. And I just want to comment that work is happening out there, and it's really, really well done.
Yeah, we covered it at the time, and it is a great update. The virtual desktop lets you kind of segment out a section of your desk, or it could be your sim cockpit to be in Passthrough, and then you have everything else virtual. And I've tried this on a couple of headsets, actually, not just virtual desktop. There are the Somnium VR1 has this as a built-in feature, letting you segment out your cockpit, and sim sort of flight sim and sim racing people really appreciate this, in my experience, from the ones that have tried it. You don't have to fumble around for your physical equipment. You're seeing it in front of you, and everything else is virtual. It's kind of the best of both worlds. And for some people who were very skeptical of mixed reality, who kind of said, I only need a VR headset. What do I need these pass-through camera capabilities for? I've spoken to some sim racers and flight sims who have tried this feature in virtual desktop, and they've kind of said, oh, I get it now. I see why this is useful.
Oh wow, let's move on. We've got the Church of Greydon being talked about in our comments, where David's deadline is coming up here for well, it's not just David's deadline, it's the deadline for everyone who has
Golf
avatar
Plus
systems
as well.
Yeah,
interestingly, right?
Yeah, we've all got to. I went in, if I go into my Quest home, I have the new avatar. I didn't do anything, right? It's just the new avatar is there on my mirror and home, and then I come in here and I've got the old avatars. So we'll see how that goes. We need to move on here to this next one, which is related, right?
I mean, I would say it's semi-related. It's quite different. So this next piece of news is that major developers are already using the Passthrough API. So just a bit of background here. You may think that developers already have access to Passthrough because you play mixed reality games. But the reality is that app developers only can use Passthrough today, right now, as a background. So any mixed reality game you're playing, the developer gets a mesh of your room. If you scanned your room, they get real-time depth information that they could use for like occlusion or for positioning things on walls quickly. But otherwise, they don't actually see your pass-through view. They don't see your view of the real world. It's essentially as if they just have a transparent background in their app, and that transparency gets filled in by the operating system with pass-through. And so this means that you can't really do some of the advanced augmented reality stuff that is kind of interesting on smartphones, and a lot of the concepts of the future of AR that you might see on social media show. And of course, at Meta Connect, Meta announced that there will be a pass-through API this year, 2025, and that will let developers access your headset cameras. Last week on the show with Kyle, we talked about how Meta support page has indicated that there is going to be a permission for this called the headset camera permission. So you go into an app in your Quest, it pops up, would you like to let this camera, this app access your headset cameras? You say yes, and now they can do some really, really cool stuff. So the news this week is that at GDC next week, Meta will host Niantic. We just talked about Niantic. Creature, they are a developer and publisher behind, for example, Starship Home, and Resolution Games, which you'll know from a dozen or more VR games and MR games, will showcase real-world examples of developers who are already leveraging our latest pass-through camera API. So this will happen at GDC. And after our report came out, I saw one or two other developers on social media say that given this is not public information, they have permission from Meta to say that they have had early access to this camera pass-through API. So developers are already working with this technology, and we expect it will probably roll out sometime in the next couple of weeks for users, and then we may see it come into apps, in the next month or two. And there are a lot of things that people can do with this. You could do object recognition. That could be detecting, a board game to overlay digital board stuff. You could do QR code tracking. You could do location recognition, the kind of VPS we were talking about from Niantic Spatial's tech, and all kinds of custom computer vision to retexture your environment, the person detection Ian just talked about, animal detection. If a developer can get that to run performantly in real time, then they will be able to do this. They get full access to the cameras if you give it to them. And given there is a revolution in machine learning right now that's been going on in the past few years, not just in large language models, but also in computer vision, if you're paying attention, these models are getting more capable, more performant, and rather than waiting for Meta to implement this in a grand way, in the slow kind of process that it takes a big tech company to do anything, nimble startups with clever computer vision engineers are going to be able to release things that are beyond anything we've seen on Quest. And I said it last week in our show with Kyle, and I'll say it again. This is the most significant Quest SDK update perhaps ever that will transform what developers can do with these headsets.
And what happens if it gets forked with Android's use of the functionality?
Sorry, what's your question?
What happens if it gets forked with the way Android rolls out this feature on their platform?
Oh, you're asking, like, is this going to be done in a way that developers can easily translate over to Google's Android XR? Is that what you're asking?
As in, you build an app for MetaQuest that uses this permission, and then you want to run it on Android XR devices instead. You probably have to go change a few lines of code to tell it to use Android's version of that API, right?
So we don't know yet. We don't know whether this will be, as Guy Godin, the developer of Virtual Desktop, is just question, will it be an OpenXR extension that works across both headsets? Will this just be literally using the existing camera permission that exists in Android on smartphones with no changes, and then it does just run across both? I think it's more likely that it is just the same Android camera permission, but we don't know yet. I doubt there will be any significant difference in the effort that developers need to do from Android XR to Quest. I don't think that'll be a roadblock here at all. This is just looking at it. The real hard work here is going to be the computer vision, not the API used to request camera access.
So last week I was in Austin visiting their holodeck there. I'll get into that in depth on a future VR download episode. I talked about it a little bit on Gamescast, but I'm still working on the story, trying to get a little bit of facts in the right place for that article. But what was really cool was they had mentioned they were exploring this API for that holodeck, and what they had done in this system is they had tried every single tracking system imaginable. They tried a Meta shared spatial anchors. They tried OptiTrack. They had anti-latency. Anti-latency is, I finally found out after we talked about it, anti-latency is this cool one that uses lights, but they're typically floor setup. Well, they tried to put them in the ceiling of this holodeck because they want people to look out the bottom of the headset and see the flooring looking clean like it would in the actual buildings, like the eventual homes that they're trying to sell here with this holodeck. They want people to look out the bottom of the headset and see that, and not these lights beaming up at them and distracting them out the bottom of the headset. So very fascinating to see them approach that way. The holodeck, if you aren't familiar, it's a term from Star Trek, and this is a 5,000 square foot structure that exists in Austin, Texas, for the purpose of selling homes there. And I'll have an in-depth report on that real soon. But it was real interesting. The Passthrough API, they also had QR codes, or the positional markers on the wall, in advance of like being able to use this as their spatial way of getting around this massive location.
Yeah, it's a great example of how you could use the Passthrough API, right? So as you say, Meta does have shared spatial anchors that are used to power local multiplayer co-location. So you're playing mixed reality with two Quest 3 headsets in the same room. You see the same virtual objects in the same place. You get the idea. But as Ian's suggesting in that article he's going to have soon, if you try to scale this up, this is designed for a certain size. It's designed for like being in a home. It's not designed for being in a giant arena or like some sort of warehouse scale. That's not yet where Meta claims that its shared spatial anchors have the quality for. But if you could use the Passthrough API, you could use QR codes and do your own constant calibration, right? Because when you can see the same QR code in the same position, you can do tracking of it and other codes around it and kind of recalibrate where you are and kind of shift the coordinate space. And that's going to be vital. I mean, in the consumer space, there's going to be cool stuff here, sure. But I mean, it's like in the enterprise space, this is where this gets really interesting. And that's Apple already does give camera permission on Vision Pro for enterprise. And we've seen a lot of companies are working with that. To be clear, that means they can't ship it on the App Store. On the Apple Vision Pro, as a consumer, you cannot do this. I have some people asking, you have Shackman saying, I think once people start making apps with this, no other headset can afford to not give that permission. That's going to be a super interesting dynamic because we know Google's Android XR debuting on the Samsung headset will have this from day one. They will have this from day one. We know Quest is going to get it in the next few weeks, basically, from this news. And that does leave open the Apple question. WWDC is in June, Apple's developer and software conference. We'll talk later about visionOS 3. Will Apple bring this to consumers too? Will they do that? The reason that a company might not, and the reason that Meta hasn't until this point, which we should bring up, is obviously the privacy concerns. Once you click agree, that developer now has access to a real-time video feed of your first-person perspective inside your home. And they can do that for a lot of cool and amazing benevolent things that help you and have really useful use cases or really fun, entertaining use cases. But they could also abuse that for malevolent reasons. And that's kind of the trade-off there that the industry is going to have to deal with. And there will be some people who never say agree to that prompt, right? Maybe when you play a mixed reality enhanced board game where you have a physical board that the Passthrough API is used to scan and position, maybe you click no and you have to manually tap your fingers or controller on each position in this board where you want things to spawn. Maybe that's how it works. And that's the trade-off that you're going to have to make if you don't want that.
Yeah, I heard this suggested by someone out there, and I guess I'll just repeat it. If you value the privacy that you get out of SteamVR tracking base stations, I would probably think about setting aside the budget to buy more of those tracking base stations soon, so you can build up your supply for decades. Because as David is pointing out, this is like a thing we don't come back from. Once this API is out there and used, it becomes incorporated into the very core of a lot of software. But there's plenty of people who don't want these cameras in their homes, and they'll be reluctant to buy a VR headset because of some of the stuff.
I just wonder how many plenty really is in reality. I mean, I just wonder, is that a significant percentage of the market, or is this a couple of thousand privacy enthusiasts?
They haven't been trained yet, David. As soon as they're trained to be okay with it, they'll be okay with it. I mean, that's like I'm saying, I'm hearing in our audience people right now who are like, I will not scan my home. And we're also pointing out to these people that all they have to do is give you a convincing game mechanic to go and scan your home for them. I'm going to point out a lot. We've covered research on this show, and I've had guests in this studio. One of the things is imagine a whole bunch of words written on the walls in different languages. Okay, so you've got hola over there for hello, and you've got 4 different versions of the word hello in different languages all over the walls. By simply identifying where your eye is pointing at and how long it is pointing at that word, they can probably deduce what language you speak, because you've pointed your eyes at the words that are in your language. That's the type of loss of privacy that we are talking about. And the people in this audience and us are the only ones that truly understand how deeply that will reveal who you are with that kind of data. On the Apple Vision Pro, they only send the gaze data every time you pinch your fingers, right? That's the only time the dev gets that access to that data.
They get to know where did you look when you pinched, and that's all. Yeah.
So devs are so if you do it quickly enough, if you make a game where you've got to be pinching rapidly, like maybe Airspace Defender, you're actually sending a pretty robust stream of your gaze data of what you're looking at that exact moment. It's a very, very big issue that is like no one has the words even to discuss how the laws should change to protect us from misuse when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, and look, there's one distinction I want to make here when it comes to the phrase "scan your home," because Quest 3, Quest 3S, Apple Vision Pro, Pico 4 Ultra, if you give them permission, if you give an app permission to access your spatial data, it's already scanning your home, but it's creating a colorless 3D mesh. It's not taking pictures, it's creating a three-dimensional geometric mesh of your home, right? That we all use this on our Quest 3 for mixed reality, right? If you're playing a mixed reality game where you want the entities to bounce off your walls or zombies to come through your window, that's a 3D mesh data that you're giving. We have to kind of distinguish that between, like, what is the difference in that? It's not scanning your home, it's giving them access to a real-time video feed of your first-person perspective that includes your home that we're talking about here. That's kind of the next step. As Christian Eccles in the comment brings up, your robot vacuum scans your home, right? If you have a robot vacuum with a LiDAR on top, like any decent robot vacuum these days, it scans your entire home, right?
And they changed the terms of service to allow for the use of that data. And we've seen, I've put Meta on the record in the past to get out of them. I've brought this up in the past. Nate Mitchell, one of the co-founders of Oculus, called me up and one of my reporters up to debate with us over whether the sensors that you point at your Rift headset are sensors or cameras. It was revealed very easily by a security researcher, a VR researcher, that those are just obfuscated webcams that are hidden. They don't identify themselves as webcams to the system, but if you go under the hood, you can access that data. Well, I had to have this debate with an executive at Oculus over the word we're using to describe what these things are doing. And that's like, now they've had 10 years to have their lawyers write the terms of service to not activate people's concerns here.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's also that, like, today, as it stands, none of these headsets send images from what the cameras take during tracking to any server, right? All of the tracking is done on board. It would be like ridiculous to have the tracking latency of having to go to a server and come back. They would take a bunch of storage and power and energy to save every frame. It would be the same as trying to recording, right? Each frame gets processed in the moment, and so the difference is that, like, when you give an app permission to do this, you don't know if it's going to do that. Now, to be fair, it would be quite easy to spot if an app was doing something bad here. Not only can you quite easily decompile these Android apps and figure it out, but if it was sending like a video feed, you would notice it if you're looking at the packets on your network, which a lot of people do, right? I want to bring up one comment here from James O'Loughlin, that has done a kind of a mocking quote of me and said, nobody cares about privacy, David. I'm not saying that nobody cares about privacy. I'm just pointing out that, separate to the philosophical discussion about what you believe about privacy, it's quite clear from the last 15 to 20 years of consumer technology that the people who are strong privacy enthusiasts strongly overestimate the degree to which regular consumers rate their perceived privacy concerns as actual product decisions, right? Look at everything from Google Street View to smart speakers like Alexa and HomePod and Google Home, to doorbell cameras, to dash cams, to TikTok, to all of the kind of ways that consumers engage with technology. And I think someone's pointing out here that I think it's a neuroscientist they're referencing, pointed out privacy as being one of the things that has the biggest disparity between how much people say they care about it and how much their actions show that they care about it. And I'm just kind of, I see James O'Loughlin saying they're just playing, and I get that, but I do think this is important to point out that, again, I'm not taking a position here. I'm not saying what I think about privacy. I'm simply saying, if you look at what consumers do in the market, these kind of theoretical privacy concerns do not play into the vast majority of people's purchasing or usage decisions.
Yeah, I think they don't pay. I think what I'm arguing, David, is like they don't play into the decisions, but they do still affect your thinking in subtle ways over the lifetime of the device, right? Like in ways you may not have realized it. Yeah, I don't know how much more we want to go down that rabbit hole, but I always think of Star Trek 4 and the guy on the bus listening to the boombox loudly and annoying everyone on the bus, and then he gives him the nerve pinch to put the guy to sleep. Right? Is it the person who made the boombox who pissed off everyone on that bus, or was it the guy that was making everyone listen to his music? It was the guy that was making everyone listen to his music, but still, there was some role that boombox played in putting that music in everybody's ears.
Interesting question here from Methos, Ohio. Any idea if the new camera API will let us take 3D videos or photos with the Quest? Great question. We don't know. Is this API going to give developers one camera, a synthesized view from both cameras, or will it give them both cameras and let you do 3D stuff? That would be very useful for developers, actually, because then you could do algorithms that rely on stereo disparity and help with computer vision. That would be a lot more useful. And then any developer could build an app like that and publish it on the store and let you kind of easily do that. It's surprising Meta hasn't done it already, right? You can do it on a Pico 4 Ultra. You can do it on an Apple Vision Pro. It's weird that you can't take photos and videos in 3D on Quest yet. Pico 4 actually has a beta feature now where you can do like system recordings in 3D. So like the same kind of recording you would do on Quest when you're just recording what you're doing, except it's in 3D from your actual like virtual view. So super cool stuff. Just like the object trackers, there's cool stuff that Pico is doing that Meta could and it isn't. And we need to point that out, even though Pico is irrelevant to most of our American viewers.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And yeah, we'll get into this. This is not a subject we will ever shy away from. It's the very core of the change in human behavior that we've been reporting on for like more than 200 episodes. I realized we have more than 200 episodes of this show, David. It's wild. Let's move on here to this next subject, though. We still have a few more meta subjects to get through today, right? I think this one will be a quick one.
Yeah, this is just something we want to note because this is real ingenuity and innovation from a developer here. So the vast majority of standalone VR and MR games are made using a game engine, the majority of them Unity, some Unreal, and then some Godot as well. Godot being like an open source alternative, a free and open source alternative, I should say, to those. But this developer of this new game, MAGE, has developed their own custom engine and physics engine, which they say lets them really squeeze out maximum performance from the Quest 3 and Quest 3S chip. So this game only does run on Meta's newer headsets. It doesn't run on Quest 2. So here's an interesting quote from the engine programmer from MAGE, Charlie Shenton. He said, "We feel that no game has truly taken advantage of the power of standalone VR hardware. Nothing ruins our immersion more than laggy games barely hitting 72 frames per second with blurry visuals and spongy physics." So he was dissatisfied with, in his view, the mediocrity that was being produced by using these engines. And, look, this is an app made in Unity right now. Using an existing game engine makes it so much faster and easier and sort of better to build a game. Better is not the right word there, I guess. More practical to build a full game where you're not reinventing everything from scratch. Developers can focus on what really matters for most games. But this, we're not going to talk about the gameplay today. They can talk about that on Gamescast. It is a tech demo. It's not like a full game. It's just, a physics playground with your hands and some magic spells. But I did get a chance to briefly try this earlier today, and it's remarkably smooth. So it has zero lag or loading screens. It runs at 120 frames per second, despite featuring dynamic lighting with dynamic shadows, a bunch of magic effects, a relatively high render resolution, and hundreds of high-fidelity dynamic physics props. So this engine they built is called Micron. And another thing that developers in our audience right now will find shocking, apparently this thing can build, package, and deploy to Quest in 10 seconds. So from building to it running on the Quest loaded is 10 seconds. And you can imagine, and any developer in the audience can imagine, what kind of iteration time that allows for really testing on the headset. No crux needed of using a simulator, Meta XR simulator, where you're using a mouse and keyboard. And like, how can you really test gameplay with that? I know that, Meta loves to talk about it. Pico loves to talk about it. Apple and Google love to tell you how you can test on the simulator. but it's nothing like really testing in a headset. So that's remarkable to me. And yet they claim that between now and full release, this is an early access game, that they can get an order of magnitude improvement out of this physics engine to go even further. So this just shows if you are willing to go straight down to the bone, get down to the low level and build your own game engine, these standalone headsets are actually capable of a lot more than what these game engines would make you think. And we have Guy Godin, the developer of Virtual Desktop, in the comments saying, Unity/Unreal are quite bloated. That's why I stayed away from those as well. So Virtual Desktop is also not using a traditional game engine.
I feel like I could probably write a very, very beautiful tragedy just about developers who decided to go build their engine. Yeah, it would be a very. My heart goes out to any devs who got to that point in their development. They're like, I'll do it myself, right? It's a joke in the community of people doing this, and I've seen it happen. And this is one of those examples where that they did it, and it was cool enough that we had to go and report on it. But yeah, for most people, that's not a good idea. If I want to ask Aaron, if you're still out there, do we have permission to show your image on our show? Because that is a cool image, and I want to show it if we can later on, if we can. Yeah, are we ready to talk about the last meta subject here?
And what was it sent to? Tips or?
Yeah, and I put it in your
cool.
Messages as well.
Yeah, we can show that at the end. Yeah, let's. I see multiple developers, kind of commending this. Biggs pointing out that John Carmack pointed this out a lot, that in many ways the performance of these systems is more software limited. We're not going to, but you could get into an entire area of discussion about modern software in general. And there are a lot of prominent programmers, especially people who have been around in the industry for decades, the software industry, who would make, really compelling arguments that everything about modern software is horribly bloated and designed as if you were trying to do the opposite of optimize for performance, as if you were trading off performance for every other possible factor. And one place where that doesn't matter is if you're on a $5,000 MacBook Pro browsing the web. But one place where it really does matter is standalone VR. So I think there is a lot of promise in this approach. And Red Matter 2 is the last thing I want to say here. They customized Unreal Engine. They changed a lot of it to deliver Red Matter 2, which I think a lot of our viewers will agree is the best looking game on Quest. And so Unreal Engine, you do get the source code and you can modify. So the only approach to this isn't, writing your own engine. You could actually modify Unreal Engine to get to this level of performance or something. But I want to see, this is a tech demo. What does it look like if some cracked, as the kids would say, developer goes and builds an entire full-fledged game with this? Could you see something that's like on the scale of Skyrim but running on a standalone headset? Who knows?
Oh my gosh. All right, so I want to call out a couple comments on the last subject before we move on to the next subject, because I just want to make sure we talk about this. Fast Lawyer said on that last thing when we were talking about the misuse of pass-through APIs, as a lawyer, I can tell you most people don't care about civil liberty. Sorry. As a lawyer, I can tell you most people don't care about civil liberties until they get arrested. And then I liked the reply to that where someone, a subcolleague said, as a criminal, I can tell you most people don't care about lawyers until they get arrested. So I appreciate that little bit of commentary on that subject. I think we're ready to talk about this last meta subject here, because I want to get to the last parts of this news, and we're still only halfway through this show. Goodness.
Yeah, this is going to be a big one. I feel like that should be a new part of the VR download drinking game. Ian saying, "Let's get through this so I can get to the last topic." This is certainly something. So we went through the problem last week on the episode with Kyle. The problem being, again, we don't have a lot of time today, so I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but the problem essentially being that Meta's integrations for Unity and Unreal, their developer integrations, didn't really respect the spirit of OpenXR, despite kind of pretending to be OpenXR backended, and meant that developers had to kind of implement a separate OpenXR subsystem if they wanted to support other PC VR headsets, and how developers had kind of find this frustrating. How one of the core contributors to OpenXR, who worked on it on Microsoft, the same guy who wrote Virtual Desktop's VDXR runtime, which you may have used on PC to get better performance than going through Virtual Desktop and SteamVR. The same guy that wrote that had his name removed from the OpenXR specification and kind of publicly protested and tried to get the Kronos Group, which is the industry consortium behind OpenXR and also behind OpenGL and Vulkan, you may know. He tried to get them to make a statement against Meta, and they kind of released this statement saying, you should use the built-in OpenXR support of Unity and Unreal. And now, one day after our show, and a couple of days after reporting, Meta came out with a statement kind of saying, ironically, the same thing, saying that from this week, as in this week of this current show, developers should now be using the built-in OpenXR support of Unity and Unreal. That's now a recommended path from Meta for developers, and that means that they will be able to embody the spirit of OpenXR, take advantage of the spirit of OpenXR, which is, to be clear, that developers write code once, one set of code, one piece of code that runs on all headsets on that operating system. So you compile a Windows app with VR support, and it runs on any VR headset that's using Windows, right? That's running on your PC. You write an Android application that supports VR, and it runs on any Android standalone headset. That's the spirit of OpenXR. The developers don't have to write all these if blocks and support different headsets for every little thing they want to do when it comes to interfacing with the hardware. So Meta is kind of saying that their argument here is that the built-in OpenXR support of these engines has now achieved feature and performance parity, that's a direct quote, with Oculus's old integrations. And so they now suggest using those. So to get specific here, for Unity, they say that you should use that OpenXR plugin that Unity makes, and then specific features can also be activated through OpenXR extensions that Meta provides through its own SDKs. For Unreal Engine, the situation is a little bit more complicated. So Unreal does have its own OpenXR support, which Meta's documentation as of last week did not mention, but Meta also offers its own integration with more Quest features. And separately, this is the complicated part, Meta maintains its own fork of Unreal Engine, which has tweaks and optimizations in the same sense I was talking about before, where you can modify the source code to be more designed for standalone VR and specifically, of course, for Quest. And to date, Meta has been strongly recommending that. Meta said in this statement that was released last week that it would offer more details on the future recommendations for Unreal Engine next week from then, which is this week now, and that still hasn't happened. It's possible it's happened while we're on the show. We may have seen the classic Meta situation of announcing news while we're live, but I don't think that's the case right now. For Godot, nothing changes. Godot, the open source alternative to these engines, it already was using a complete OpenXR system that wasn't like a Meta-specific thing. There are OpenXR extensions, which let companies add their own features on top of OpenXR in a compliant way. That's already how Meta's extra features worked on Godot. So we're still waiting for those details. Based on Meta's statement, it should be either today or tomorrow that we get the full details. But the good news here is that era of Meta recommending SDKs that make it harder for developers to support other headsets, according to Meta's statement and the recommendations, that is ending. And so my own personal comment here is I don't think that this was some sort of Machiavellian scheme by Meta to, undermine OpenXR. I think what really happened here was that this was their long-term plan. They have been supporting OpenXR. They have been the biggest contributor to OpenXR and all the extensions and things like that. And I think it just was a very long strategy execution time. I think these big companies, it takes weeks, months, and years, often years, to get things out the door. And they didn't want to put their engineering resources to updating some old integration that the developers who made it probably left the company years ago. They wanted this as their strategy, and it took a lot longer than they may have expected. That doesn't mean that the Meta is completely absolved here of making developers' lives harder. But what it does mean is that the evidence here, if you look at the fact that Meta was a founding member of OpenXR, it's been supporting it in its headset for years. It's been, propping up it in Godot. It paid a bunch of Godot veterans to improve the engine's OpenXR support. I don't think this is an evil scheme by Meta. I think it's just a case of things taking too long and bad timing.
So I'm seeing Guy out there responding and making a couple comments. And David, I'd love for you to read Biggs' comments out there, because he looks like he's dealing with some lost time, or he's worried about losing time because of something related here. But Guy's saying they still advertise to use their Meta SDK on their website and give warnings when you don't use it. They've been doing this for 2 years instead of fixing their SDK to be cross-platform. And it would have been a week of work at most. It's very clear why they didn't do this. That's very charged comments from Guy, who has had to deal with this at the level that, I mean, that is his layer that he's dealing with Meta on.
No, Guy doesn't use Unity or Unreal, so Guy actually specifically isn't affected by what we're talking about here.
My point is that's his layer that he lives in. Like he has to have his own tools because Metas weren't working for him, right?
Well, sure. So Virtual Desktop had to work around the fact that the Unity and Unreal integrations on PC were only wanting to talk to QuestLink and had to kind of integrate a hack there. So unlike what Virtual Desktop does for users, well, sure, Guy had to hack around that, but not on like the actual. Exactly. Guy is saying not directly, but indirectly through the PC VR games that have issues in Virtual Desktop. Should point out for balance that in Guy's like what they've done, you're saying they still have high speed and yeah, they're saying that like within 24 hours according to I'm not going to change. They're going to start changing all that to say go use Unity on Unreal then connect support. And then there is no issue with that that you are using the
All right. Well, I'm back and I'm talking. So let me know if you can hear me out there. All right. Well, I'll just keep talking to myself here in the middle of nowhere. Pull up my pull up my multitasking here to see if David is messaging me out here.
Yeah.
I don't.
The last years,
Sounding like I'm part of the org, I guess. That's
yeah, I think we're having some connection issues, folk. We'll have to just kind of pause here until this gets sorted.
all right. Well, I am back. Can you hear me? David, where are you? David's under the desk. Let me know if you can hear me out there in the audience, if I'm back and I still, yeah, tell me if I sound like I'm talking at normal speed. Yeah, sound in real time better. Arlen's still better than Zuck's Horizon World. All right, Ian's still slow mode. Ian better now. Still slight slow robot. Okay. Back like a no. That's not. I don't know if I can go wired right now. Use Unity or Unreal, then the stream died for me. Make sure you're all live if you're watching us now. Turn the knob of the robot down. Perfect. You sound okay. So it's sounding like I'm sounding good now. I think people are caught up. People are caught up saying that I sound good. How do you sound?
Yeah, it was a connection issue, so we've solved that now. We figured out what was causing that. We just had to restart some network equipment. Everything should be back now. So I think what we were talking about before we left was obviously the OpenXR topic.
Yeah, and I was going on a side avenue of talking about WhatsApp being the way Meta. Yeah, I know, being the way. So there was a comment up here saying from Jack talking about Meta needing to own the social substrate of the next platform. And all of this feels like it's a secondary to the idea that you're going to have a single WhatsApp call that vibrates your wrist on Meta's upcoming wristband. You'll answer it on your glasses, and you'll come inside your home, take off your glasses, and continue the phone call inside of your VR headset. My question is, how does that flow work with this?
So, I mean, the answer is that these are like entirely unrelated. These are on completely opposite ends of the stack. OpenXR is not a consumer feature, it's a developer feature. OpenXR means that you write an application and it runs on every headset. It really is, that's it, right?
I think we lost our connection again.
I think those are developers that are, or sorry, those are viewers that are delayed. That's the issue. Those are people.
Arlen and James are regular viewers, and I think they're up to present. Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
no, now you're
back
saying it's back.
again
No,
now.
I think we're
Okay.
back. Look, let me just continue.
Okay, sorry.
We're back. Trust me. It's just people, like, this is the issue because people's comments are delayed. We're back. So, you're, yes, as Arlen said, you should refresh the stream. But I guess you're not going to hear that if you're in the past. Hopefully the viewers can see that in the comments. To continue, yeah, WhatsApp and the social substrate are like way up here at the very, very top of the software stack. They are on top of everything, on top of the application. These are the system layer things. OpenXR is all the way down here at the bottom. It's literally just how does a developer interface with your headset, like, or the engine? How does it, render to your display? How does it get the coordinates of your track controllers? How does it, send a vibration to your controllers? How does it access eye tracking or hand tracking data. All of that stuff is like really, really low level. And that's what OpenXR does. I need to stress OpenXR is a developer feature. The purpose of OpenXR and why Meta specifically supports OpenXR is that it makes developers' lives easier. And it really is, as cliche as it sounds, a rising tide lifts all boats things. When it's easier for developers to build for VR, more developers will build for VR and more developers will keep building for VR and MR, of course. If you make it that you have to use your own proprietary API, well, then from a simple perspective for studios, it becomes a cost thing because I have to implement Meta's API and HTCs and Picos and all of this in the parallel universe where there is no OpenXR. And that's what it was like before, right? If you were building a game and you wanted to publish it for the Oculus Rift store and SteamVR for HTC Vive back in 2016, you had to use these two separate APIs, and you had to basically, for each bit of functionality in your code that had anything to do with the headset or controllers, you had to do it twice. And it's literally, in some cases, as simple as an if statement, a if Oculus, if SteamVR, else if SteamVR, and you're doing all of this over and over. And that means that, if another new headset then comes out, right? So then Microsoft comes out with Windows MR and you want to go in the Windows MR store, you have to kind of build for it. And when PlayStation VR comes out, you have to do another one for PlayStation VR. And that's still the case for certain headsets, right? For Apple Vision Pro and for PlayStation VR 2, these are still separate SDKs that aren't using OpenXR. But the promise of OpenXR is, and the reality in many cases, is that that's not a thing anymore, right? There are many apps that are Quest only that you can sideload on to a Pico or a HTC Vive headset, and it works, right? It just works. And we'll talk about that later, actually, when it comes to Steam Link, because I guess I'll say it now and we'll reference it later. Even though the Steam Link app is only on the Quest store, if you pull off that APK and put it on your Pico headset, it runs. Why? Because it uses OpenXR.
I love that. I love that feature. I love that you can go find the APK for exactly that purpose, right? It's one of the only platforms to make its APK available to you that way, and it's fantastic the way that works. Yeah, I appreciate you pushing back on that, David, as being a completely different end of the spectrum for the users. I still think there's important things to think about when it comes where we arrive at all of this, what tools devs use, end up determining things years from now. And yeah, there is an effort. All right, this is the example that I've thought of. I brought it up on Gamescast. David, do you think Civ 7 games will continue from volumetric VR to flat screen Horizon? Can I take my headset off and continue a game of Civ 7 on Horizon?
So they haven't said yet, but as far as I'm aware, no is the answer. I think Civ 7 VR is a separate spin-off that is designed for shorter play sessions. I don't think it is. As far as their marketing materials make clear, it's not. Could they build a game like that in theory? Of course they could. Did they do that specifically in this case? All indications point to no.
Yeah, I got to ask questions like that. I got to ask those types of questions so that we understand what is the flow of the future. Right now, on an Apple Vision Pro, I can play Civ 7 on ultra wide screen, and then I take the headset off after an hour of time in headset on this super wide screen that isn't physical, and it reformats, or should reformat, straight to my flat screen on the Mac floating right in front of me. How does every platform do that in this new world with OpenXR as the basis of their system? Does Meta provide those tools to have these screens go back and forth between VR and flat that way?
So
I know this is so secondary to OpenXR, but these are the questions that devs are struggling with at the platform layer.
It's an interesting question, but again, it's just not really specifically related to OpenXR, right? You can make a 2D Android app that changes into OpenXR mode, right? That is kind of the way you relate it to this. But OpenXR doesn't, whether or not there was a proprietary API or an open API, That's just doing what Steam Link does today, or Citra VR does today, switching between a 2D app and an immersive app. These are modes. YouTube does it. The YouTube app on Quest lets you switch. That's something you could do, but again, in the particular case of Civ 7, as you say, on Apple Vision Pro, you can play it on a giant virtual screen, and then you can go to your real virtual screen, but you cannot play it in immersive 3D mode where it's a mixed reality kind of like Civ table where the characters are 3D and popping out. Like, that's not what you get on Vision Pro, and it's sort of very indicative of their different responses.
Mm. Yeah, thank you, Biggs, for sort of responding and seeing what I'm trying to get at here, because it's such a tricky issue, and we talk about the technical layers here, but there is just this end need, right? I want to start a game. I want to start a game on my phone and then continue it in VR and then pop back out of VR, and it's like they're all trying to do it, and there's no way for it to work yet.
There is a way. They could do it tomorrow, right? If they wanted to do it, you can do it. Like, that's just cloud saves that go between devices. You have games that support that already, playing on your PC or your Switch, for example, where you have cloud saves from one to the other. Like, it's not that there's no technology to do this. It's not that no one's made the API. It's just that they, in Civilization 7's case, they have decided that they want to design the immersive version of the game, the one that's either in VR or MR on a table in front of you. They want to design it to be a slightly shorter play session thing where you get the whole thing done in one, rather than switching between devices at all. But like, to be clear, if they had wanted to do it this way, if they had just said, I don't care about the comfort of the headset or their battery life, I want to make the exact same Civ 7 run and have crossplay, they could have done it. There's no technical barrier there from doing it.
And that is how Among Us 3D works, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what they're going to... Yeah, I mean, there are...
And it doesn't require meta at all. And
no, of course not. That's how No Man's Sky works. No Man's Sky is a game that does exactly what you just said, right? You can go on your PlayStation VR 2 or your PC VR and play all day, and then go and switch to your PC or PS5 and continue playing, right? Like, you can... Like, games do this today. And as you say, Among Us 3D is going to do the exact same thing.
Yeah, Biggs is saying we're both exactly right. Yes, so we're both arriving at the same place here. My leading questions here, if I was a lawyer here, was to try to point out that, like, Meta needs something that we need. Like, Meta needs us to need something that they provide us, and so far they haven't found it.
I'm just making the point that it's not to do with Meta. It's the developer, right? Meta isn't stopping or helping anyone from doing what you described. It's got nothing to do with them.
Yeah, fair. All right. Well, we need to move on to this next one, because it's kind of what I've been hinting at with this. I really think this is Meta. I just told you what Meta needs from us. This is what Meta needs from the world. It needs it needs this material, doesn't it?
That's a really good way to put it. So this is a very interesting one that I think is exciting, but some people perhaps may have gotten a little bit too excited about it in terms of the time scales that we're talking about here. So a little bit of background context here. You will have known that Meta demoed the Orion AR glasses prototype at Connect back in September, and shocked the world by achieving what no other device in true glasses form factor with transparent optics has ever done, an actually decent field of view that isn't terrible, right? Any other glasses that you get that are in actual glasses form factor, not a headset, are at like 50 degrees at most field of view. Maybe if you go into like the X-Real things that are not really glasses at all, they're kind of like extruded out from your head, and if you see them in real life, they look kind of ridiculous. They get to maybe 57 in their highest end models. But if you want something that actually sits kind of flush to your face as real glasses, the maximum you're going to get is on the order of 46 degrees. And with Orion, Meta achieved 70 degrees diagonal field of view. Now, in the VR world, right, that's not impressive, because in your VR headset, you're actually getting, if you're talking about diagonal, you're getting like 110, 120, 130, depending on what headset you're using, diagonal field of view. But for AR, you have to realize that the bar is quite low, and that the glasses frame itself is confirming what sort of field of view you have. And having a really ultra wide field of view isn't as important because you do get peripheral vision by the fact that everything other than the glasses is just real life, and the glasses you're seeing through a real life. So 70 degrees is actually very, very impressive and gets to the point where you could actually pass that Pokemon test that Ian and I are talking about, where you're in the park and you can see your friend and your own Pokemon in a Pokemon battle at the same time. And that's what sucks about pretty much every other pair of AR glasses, such as the Snapchat AR spectacles. The field of view is very constrained. You don't get object permanence. You look around and you're seeing like a slice of digital objects at once, but you don't even get persistence. Like I made the example before of I was playing a whack-a-mole game. I'm sorry if this is part of the drinking game now, but I'm playing a whack-a-mole game using my fist to whack the moles on a table in front of me, and the field of view is so constricted that I can't actually see the entire board at once. So I have to move my head really, really rapidly like this, panning to see all of the little possible holes that could come out, and whack like this because the field of view is that restricted, right? It's a ridiculous scenario, but that's where they are. And that's the state of most AR glasses. And that's why Orion is remarkable. But to achieve Orion's field of view, they had to use this material for the waveguides called silicon carbide. So the primary bottleneck for the field of view of transparent AR optics is the refractive index of the material of the lens. And silicon carbide has the highest of any known visibly transparent material. It has a refractive index of 2.7. So compared to glass, which is used in spectacles, HoloLens, Magic Leap, it's 1.8. Glass 1.8, silicon carbide 2.7. And so as such, Meta's researchers and scientists and engineers describe silicon carbide as a wonder material for AR. So great, right? We've now figured out the material to make the AR glasses that everyone really wants out of science fiction. Let's go. No. Unfortunately, there's a problem. Producing optical grade silicon carbide is incredibly expensive and complicated, and there is no established supply chain, definitely not a commercial scale for it, right? This is the kind of thing that like a couple of labs can grow in their basement and made in very small scale at very low yields. So because of this, Meta admitted at Connect, Meta's not lying about this. Meta has freely admitted at Connect that if it wanted to sell Orion as a product, the price would have to be above $10,000. And that's obviously just not remotely practical. So this is why Meta freely and openly describes Orion as a time machine that lets us live in the future, and why Orion is not being made into a product. It's not that, Meta is refining it or getting things ready or kind of putting the finishing touches on it. Meta has openly said Orion is not becoming a product. Instead, Meta is making a separate pair of AR glasses codenamed Artemis, reportedly arriving in 2027 and using glass. So the same kind of limited field of view of the previous AR glasses in the world. But of course, the question has been, when do we get silicon carbide lenses? And now in a new blog post, Meta has explained that the overwhelmingly positive reception of Orion from the tech industry has led suppliers across the world to accelerate their plans for producing optical grade silicon carbide. So Meta says that they're seeing interest across the supply chain on 3 different continents where they're heavily pursuing it as an opportunity. And Meta Reality Labs director of research science has said, silicon carbide will come out on top. It's just a matter of time in my book. Suppliers are very excited about the new opportunity. But they caution here, Meta's cautioning, it's still early days and there's still a lot of work to be done here. So they finish by saying, the world is awake now. We've successfully shown that silicon carbide can flex across electronics and photonics. There's a lot of work to be done, but the potential upside here is huge. So the over positive reading of this is silicon carbide's coming next year or the year after. And I don't think that's true. If you look at this, this is the earliest stage of developing a supply chain. One thing I want to point out is we talk about micro OLED displays, like arrived in Big Screen Beyond in 2023 and then arrived in Apple Vision Pro in higher density. But UploadVR was reporting on companies early on in the supply chain experimenting with pancake lenses and micro OLED displays in 2017, right? So it took, even for just getting like micro OLED on silicon into actual products, took like uh, 7 years, right? At high density. So this is, I think what this means is it's going to happen sooner than it would have had Orion not been received so well. But this is still not an anytime soon kind of thing. This is still a long way off. There's like, if you look at the technical details of this, which you can go and like look at our article and kind of get linked to more details, they're still trying to figure out how on earth do you do this. But the difference here is that a lot of people want to now. A lot of people are trying and they care about it and they want to, but we're not even at the stage where like anyone has started the first, optical grade silicon carbide for consumer AR glasses factory yet. It's still in the how do we do this phase.
So I've got two questions. One is, what if AR is a bad idea? And the second one is, what materials do you think Palmer Luckey's headset will be using at Anduril?
Sure. Before that, I want to address one comment from James O'Loughlin, who says Magic Leap 2 uses glass and results in 70-degree field of view. And that is true, but that's why I carefully said in glasses form factor. Magic Leap 2 is almost 3 times the weight of Orion. It is bulky goggles with multiple layers of glass that ramps up the cost, the complexity, the power needed to drive it, right? You have this wired external battery and compute pack to Magic Leap 2. It's certainly an interesting approach, but I don't think that you can't scale that down to glasses. Magic Leap 2's approach right now, unless they've made a breakthrough that no one knows about, you can't scale that to glasses. What was your second question, Ian?
What material do you think Palmer Luckey's headset will use at Anduril?
I think silicon carbide, but you have to realize that he is making he's making an Eagle Eye headset that does not have to be consumer cost, right? Like Meta has said, we could do this for Orion, $10,000.
My point.
The U.S. military would spend $100,000 on each of these headsets, right?
Do you think Palmer Luckey secured a lifetime's worth of supply of this material for his purposes before Meta could get there?
I think the first half of your question, yes. The second half, no. I still think the cost he'd be able to get it at is still going to be it doesn't affect Meta, right? It's like, these things is costing him the same amount of money as Orion, right? Like $10,000. If he's getting these for that doesn't matter to Meta, right? If a key component of a product costs $10,000, like Meta doesn't care, right? Like it show the investors that we can make a cool thing, but not when it comes to what are you putting in a product.
But you see, sure, but follow me down this rabbit hole a little bit here. How many ounces of silicon carbide do you think Palmer Luckey is going to ship in the next 5 years compared to how many ounces of silicon carbide Meta is going to ship in the next 5 years?
I think Meta is going to ship 0 in the next 5 years. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't think we're getting silicon carbide in consumer products that are anything below, that kind of price range in the next 5 years. I think this might have changed it to being maybe 5, right? This might have changed the timeline of reality from this being 10 years down to 5, maybe, or something like that. That's what I'm trying to. Those are just example numbers. But James O'Loughlin points out one constraint that's very different, which is that optical grade silicon carbide has ITAR regulations in the US, so regulations on how you can export it, and those don't apply to military, obviously. So if Meta wanted to build silicon carbide lenses just for the US, it would actually be a lot easier. But if they want to export it to other countries, they would have to get an ITAR exemption, and then or as Palmer Luckey actually pointed out, they could just build it in each region, right? So the Orion glasses for Europe are built in Europe, the ones for Asia are built in Asia, the ones for America are built in America. But that's obviously the logistics of that drives up the cost even more.
Interesting.
So I guess you could have to see regulations change here, right? You may need to see is there an exemption for AR glasses in general in future? The thing is, I don't think this is going to happen anytime soon still. That hasn't changed, but I think it's going to happen sooner than it would have. But something can still be far off and sooner than it would have been otherwise.
But I get what you're saying, and it's something that we've talked about with Apple a little bit, right? That the idea that their display system, the displays that they've put inside that headset pulled a bit of tech from the future into now, and it's unfortunate that it costs $3,500. but that's effectively what they did. They sped up the timeline a little bit towards sort of the end-all be-all VR headset, and it's not there. It's still bulky and massive, but you can see we're closing in on it right from here. Everything else gets lighter from here. But I got to go back to this whole AR versus VR thing, right? Like, if Palmer Luckey is shipping a lot of ounces of silicon carbide to military over the next decade, doesn't that also buy him manufacturing capacity that he can use in other places for other things, like selling it back to Meta as a supplier, sort of thing?
It seems on, I mean, I don't know Anduril's plans. I don't think they've been specific about Eagle Eye at all. It's possible they could want to be vertically integrated and go all the way down the supply chain and own the silicon carbide layer. I don't think it's likely because, I mean, if someone does figure out, if factories do figure out how to get this done at scale, then they're going to, it's one of those things where it'll be like gradually then all at once. Because as soon as you can do it at scale, the scale goes far beyond what just Lucky would need, right? It's the same reason Apple doesn't buy display factories, right? It contracts companies to do it, right? It buys its iPhone displays off Samsung and LG and other display makers, or to be specific, the display divisions of these companies, or Sony, right? Because then the scale of that is always going to be higher than just one company's products. It's the same thing for Meta, right? It's the same reason that like it very rarely makes sense to be that vertically integrated and go all the way down the bottom. But you know, there are some companies that try to make an exception to this. But even if you look at like Tesla and how vertically integrated it is, they don't want to be the entire supplier for their own batteries, because the scale that other companies can achieve when they're supplying batteries to everything else is still going to be superior, right? But I'm really interested to see, does Eagle Eye use silicon carbide lenses? It seemed highly possible.
I got to get back to my question here. I got to go back to the is AR the wrong idea, and I mean that in the term. I mean, when I'm using AR here, I'm saying transparent optics as we walk around in the real world. David had the image ready for us to put up there. What I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to the idea I want us to ponder. I see it week after week in our comments. You and I deal with it. Like conceptually, what should be the brand of UploadVR? Are we going to have to be UploadMR? Is it Upload Spatial? What is the term that we're going to have to change to over time? And I'm going to argue here that pointing cameras in people's faces out in the real world is not going to pass the marker of socially acceptable. It's just not going to fit right. I would be more willing to go sit at a coffee table and wear this thing in public than I would putting a whole bunch of people walking down the street with my cameras, just slowly analyzing everything I see. I'd rather sit somewhere and quietly use my VR headset than take it off and not have augmentation.
Okay.
Here, augmentation makes sense to me, David, for security purposes. I understand being augmented to provide security to a space. What I don't understand is any other purpose for augmentation.
I mean, that's very presumptuous that you don't think there are huge usage cases for glasses. Let's take this bit by bit, right? So firstly, both of these things are going to be covered in cameras. So when you're sitting down in that coffee shop with this on, you're all these cameras at all these people, and these computer vision algorithms are analyzing all these people, mostly just to pick out, you know, their tie has an interesting pattern that it can use for positional tracking.
So, David, I wore my Apple Vision Pro at the gate of the airport here in New York as I was getting ready to fly to Austin, and I felt bad as I did it. But the reason that feeling bad went away was because here was the reality of being in that airport terminal. I'm surrounded by 100 other people who are all waiting for their flight to take off. And the audio system is playing a song for everyone in this airport terminal. And every 10 seconds or 8 seconds or so, the audio on the airport terminal, this music that's playing for everyone here, would short out for 2 seconds. So every single one of these 100 people out there is tuning out the absolute horrible audio experience of being in this terminal and listening to this music that isn't music, right? It's shorting out. You can't hear a song. Every time you're starting to vibe with the music, it shorts out. 100 people have all tuned it out. What I did was I said, no, I'm not going to tune that out. I'm not going to deal with everyone around here. Go ahead and listen to that terrible music. I'm going to put on my headset. I'm going to put in my AirPods, and I'm going to listen to some great sound. Okay. That use case I see becoming very, very popular over time. What I don't see is the opposite. We just spent the last section of the show talking about the economics of silicon carbide being applicable to this design of headset immediately. Like,
no. The silicon carbide is applicable to this.
It's applicable to Palmer Luckey's headset and this.
No, but it's not going to be as far as we know, we don't know yet, but if it's a transparent AR optics, we're kind of using two different terms to conflate two different things here. This is, for lack of better terms, opaque display system using cameras to pass through the real world. That's not what silicon carbide lenses help for. They're helping for transparent optics. I think, as a lot of the commenters saying here, I don't think like the cameras being on the glasses are going to stop people from using, just like them being on the headset isn't. And you already live in the world where when you were in that airport outdoors, every single Uber driver had a camera that's not just analyzing, but recording 24/7. You were on, as you walked into that airport, 37 different car dash cams. You were probably on, if you're in a developed country, which I assume you were at the time, 150 different airport cameras that are constantly recording everyone else. You were probably, depending on the density of the airport, in at least 3 people's TikToks that they were recording, or like
you've
I'm
convinced
just pointing
me.
out, like,
You've convinced me that the cameras belong on there. What you haven't convinced me is why it needs a display system.
Oh, sure, because I mean, there are a bunch of different uses, right? One is navigation, right? You're in a new city and you're trying to get to the cafe to meet your friend, or you're trying to get to the part of the airport where you get your Uber or the bus, and you're like, where the hell do I go? Do you take out your phone and fumble around with Google Maps as the GPS bounces off all the buildings, and your little blue dot flies all over the place, and you're like, where the F am I? How do I get here? Is this pointing the right way? Or do you put on your glasses and then see a floating blue arrow that points you to exactly where you need to go, where you see a giant quest marker over the head of the person you need to talk to, or whatever you want to implement it as? When you see a sign that you don't understand, do you want to take out your phone and point it up and look at your phone display as it translates it? Or do you want to see those words on that sign in that foreign language instantly change to English in front of you? A couple of use cases. Do you want to, every time you feel a buzz in your pocket, take out your phone or look down at your watch and wait for the text to scroll across the tiny little 1-inch screen? Or do you want to see that notification fly up over there to the side and track along, and then with one flick of your hand, or even if you have the neural wristband, just a flick of your thumb, have that notification disappear? Like, the use cases of AR glasses are enormous. And you could even talk about like the virtual screen thing you're just talking about. It's a better form factor for most people to have a virtual screen, right? They're sitting on the bus and they want to quickly watch a video, right? You have their earbuds in, or maybe even just one earbud in, or whatever it happens to be. And instead of taking out their phone and looking at their little phone display like this, or instead of, taking out their headset from their backpack and donning it on and clipping in the battery, they just, on their glasses, bring the video up and pin it in front of them and watch it. Like, the use cases I don't think the issue with AR glasses is that we don't need them. If you could magic these things out of the realm of science fiction and into reality, as I often say, like, a lot of people are going to want these things. I mean, we already look at the use cases of even the displayless Ray-Ban glasses. 2 million sold already of just cameras and audio. And so this is going to have all that and more. And the one thing I want to point out is that as you walk along, it actually isn't going to be constantly analyzing everything you're doing if you're not running an app, because that would be a giant waste of battery. The majority of the time, for simple energy conservation reasons, this is going to work like Ray-Ban Meta glasses. It's only going to be when you need the AR that it pops into existence. And then, you meet your friend in the park and you have your Pokemon battle while, not needing to take anything out of your backpack.
Yeah. So it's funny. I love it, David. I go back and forth on this. You've convinced me that there's maybe a product category here. At the same time, that it felt like everything you just described is going to be doable as these get smaller.
Sure, but I'm not convinced that this. So you're not convinced that the social acceptability of these things is going to be okay because they have cameras on them. I'm not convinced that the social acceptability of these things are going to be okay because, like, realistically, you're like you look like how do I put this? The general like aesthetics and fashion of having a headset on your head, even if it's slim and light, is going to be a very difficult sell, especially when they're opaque, right? And you can then add the reverse pass through on the front, and it's possible that that gets really, really good, especially on the expensive headsets. With the take the idea of Apple Vision Pro's front display and just make it 10 times better, but it's still going to be a tough sell to look at someone's rendered virtual eyes when you're like getting on the bus or walking down the street and trying to find your Uber. Like I don't know. It's going to be
Uh,
strange to have people look at you like this versus
I, I
look
saw I
through
saw a
glasses.
guy wearing glasses on the current generation of glasses, Rainio, I think it was, on the train, and I was able to make eye contact with the guy out the side of his headset, and ask him a question that way. And that's more or less how we talked to each other, was him looking out the side of his field of view. That's entirely possible as the way to make eye contact with people in our
So
HMVs as
I mean,
well.
you kind of turn like this and look at them from the side. I don't
Or
know.
flip it up, or or you
Yeah.
just put "Do Not Disturb" on the front of your headset. You have a nice little e-ink
I'm,
display that says "Do Not Disturb," or "Ring me for a drink" if you're on an airplane,
but I
right?
mean, like,
Like,
you're walking onto a bus or you're walking onto the airplane and saying hello to the flight attendant. Like, do you keep the headset on or do you take it off?
yeah, on that, I did take the headset off instead of walking in to the thing. But as you are so apt at pointing out, right? Uh, 90% of the people on that flight had AirPods or of some kind. They had
Sure.
headphones of some kind. We are we're at the very beginning of a journey where uh, when you're in a protected space. I mean, think about that kid at the U.S. Open of tennis last year, who popped out his Vision Pro or his family's Vision Pro in the middle of a tennis match and started watching uh, tennis, or started watching whatever he wanted inside of the headset while a tennis match was happening right in front of him. Like, that's there's so few headsets in the world right now, and there's so few places where you're safe from someone thieving the headset literally off of your head, that is just not acceptable. I'll argue that that's the bigger thing holding people back right now from doing this is, oh, you've got a $300 thing on your head. I'm going to take it right off of you. That's
I,
so easy.
I mean, there's a lot of cities where people will snatch your phone anyway, and it doesn't stop people from using phones, right? There's a huge problem in London, phone snatching. People just drive up on bikes and literally pull it out of your hand and run away. I don't think that's the biggest problem with it. I think the biggest problem is that, as James O'Loughlin has asked in the comment, yes, this is a render. This is a beautiful looking headset. The reality is that the headsets we have today are incredibly ugly and bulky compared to this, and you wouldn't want to be caught dead with them. Or most people care about how they look to some degree, and I don't think anyone wants to sit in a cafe. Well, I don't think the vast majority of people, to be fair, want to sit in a cafe or on a plane wearing you know, this. Like, this just doesn't look good. This looks strange in a different way, right? At least this is binocular. This makes you look like a strange kind of triclops kind of thing, and the cameras are obvious and weird, and you look like like a Borg or something. It's very, very different from if we did have the kind of reverse pass through, sleek, slim visors. Paradise Decay is saying they do use a Quest in a cafe. All power to you. I'm sure VR enthusiasts do. But if you ask the average person to put something like this on their head in a cafe, they're going to say no. They're going to, you're going to get some strange looks that I don't think you would get even with Vision Pro. Like, Vision Pro has a more sleek and beautiful design. And that does matter. Like I say this often in the show. I think the aesthetics for the specific use case of using these headsets outdoors, in cafes, on trains, on planes, it does matter. And I think very few people would have a problem if it looked like this. But again, this is a
No,
concept render of
I
a.
appreciate Clay's comment. Clay's comment saying think about Daft Punk helmets. People love that. I don't think it would take much for celebs to adopt weird visors. Think about that, right? Celebrities, everywhere they go, they are noticed and their privacy is taken away from them. They put on a helmet, right? They start walking around like the creepy aliens in that Under the Skin movie. Um, they have privacy all of a sudden. That's what I'm getting at here. That all of the motivations of the technology are aligned with VR. When I put on my VR headset, I have portable focus anywhere in the world. And sure, there's a certain amount of social anxiety at doing that in certain settings. But in what I'm finding is that it's actually more important to me that I get my focus, that I'm able to do what I want. And yeah, think about those celebrities and how much freedom they would suddenly feel by not being recognized in some places. I'm going to have to plug in a battery, so I'll be right back.
Sure. Yeah. I do think that focus is an important use case. The ability to kind of have noise canceling for your eyes is a very interesting potential of VR headsets going forward, for sure. However, I don't actually think most people are going to want to have a facial interface against their head when they're using these things for long periods for productivity. Having that against your face is actually uncomfortable for a lot of people. And we don't point this out often, but for a lot of women, it's a non-starter because you're not going to want to smear your makeup all over your face just to sit on the train and use your headset, right? So I think actually that for those reasons and more, the open periphery design that you see on the likes of the Samsung headset that I was pointing out earlier actually will likely kind of win out. And then you don't really have that same advantage of focus. I think we've got Ian back now. Yeah, I was just pointing out. Yeah, I was just pointing out that, what you're describing is really more about open periphery versus closed facial interface. Because if you look at the Samsung headset, like, do you have full focus here? And I was saying that I think most people, if they want to use this like on a train on the way to work or, on a plane, are actually going to want to have the open periphery because it's more comfortable. And for women, because it's not going to smear their makeup, right? Like, again, I've demoed VR to hundreds of people. And a lot of women have told me that, like, if they wanted to use this as like something in their daily life, I've demoed virtual screens, they'd say, that would be a significant concern. And so then I've shown them like the Quest Pro, where it has the open periphery, and they're like, oh yeah, this solves that problem. If you kind of had this and lighter, that I get how that could be a solution to this. So these, Yo-Yo's pointing out that long hair can also cause cross-fiction, right? All of these headsets currently need some sort of padding, whether it be on the front or the back or a top strap that can interfere with hair. The advantage of a glasses form factor, whether it be transparent optics or not, is that you don't annoy anyone's hair or anyone's makeup or anything like that. And that's a huge advantage for mass market practical usage. Even though, yes, I still do think you're going to see a lot of people using headsets for a richer productivity experience, as especially business people and such on trains and planes and cafes and etc.
It's fascinating. I appreciate this context of the open periphery. It makes a lot of sense, David. However, right, like, I was so angry when I was in that airport terminal. I was so angry at the sound, right, and like the experience that everyone else was just enduring, right, that I was very happy to have that area of focus and not have the open facial interface, even though you're exactly right.
Well, I guess the advantage is, right, to be clear, for the Samsung headset, when you have an open periphery design, you have both, because you just get clip-ons. And, Quest Pro did this. It was ahead of its time, actually. It kind of didn't matter at Quest Pro because the pass-through was so terrible that nobody really wanted to use mixed reality on it. But they had a good idea. Classic meta of good idea, but bad execution. But it's an option, right? So you're sitting in that airport and you decide maybe there's the kids running around all over the place and something annoying and you just want to focus on your work. So you clip on your little side facial interface. You clip this up and cover this up, and now it's all gone and you can focus. But you could imagine a design that adds those to AR glasses as well, right? In theory, if you have tintable lenses, you tint down the lenses to go to like sunglasses level visibility. You have your virtual screens, a very kind of translucent view of the real world, and then you block out the sides. It seems separate to this. We really should on, by the way.
Yeah, man. I'm at 3% here on, I think it's going up now on my battery, but we're over 2 hours and we're still halfway through the show. So please hit the like button and stick with us for the duration. We lost connection halfway through the stream. David brought it back from the brink. I appreciate Don Hopper out there telling everyone to hit the like button earlier in the show because we did lose a bunch of viewers during all of those technical glitches, but we're going strong here. And I don't know, David, I just think we're going to have big VR headsets and small VR headsets in the future. And yeah, AR is going to be a great mode inside those headsets, but I'm
I think you're
just
going. I think you're going to have all three eventually. I think the one thing we do agree on, perhaps, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're not going to get these magic AR glasses with wide field of view anytime soon. So for the foreseeable future, because the AR glasses, the technology to build them cannot be produced at mass scale, you're going to have, to be clear, slimmer and lighter headsets that use pass-through with higher and higher resolution cameras with open periphery designs that deliver what people want from AR glasses, but through cameras on headsets. But then eventually, once you do get AR glasses, like the form factor advantage, imagine if the same size of case, roughly, that you have your Ray-Ban glasses in could hold a pair of AR glasses, and you could literally fit them in your pocket and just slide them on. Imagine how much you would use it from a friction perspective.
I won't.
And you could bring up your virtual screens.
Yeah, I just hate that you called it a AR headset, not VR glasses, right?
But
Like
I mean,
that's a VR glasses in a case is what I want.
Sure, but so like from a physics perspective, the idea of like the way the transparent optics works by using these tiny projectors on waveguides allows them to be a lot smaller and lighter. Like we haven't seen any, even big screen beyond, right, which doesn't have any compute. It's literally just, the smallest, lightest headset you can get, and it's using VR style optics. It's 100, and they've shaved off every gram, as we always say. That's their philosophy. Get rid of every single gram. They're at 127 grams, right? Like compare that to Orion, Meta's Orion, which is the main rendering compute is offloaded, but this thing has a battery, it has tracking on board, it has eye tracking, it has hand tracking. All of those things are running on the actual glasses themselves, as well as like audio and microphones and all of this. And it's like 98 grams, right? And you could very much so, if you had this to be wired, if it was like big screen beyond size, you could probably get that thing down to 50 grams if you unloaded everything down to a wire. So like it's just from a basic engineering perspective, it's going to be possible to get something that fits as a full system in your Ray-Ban Meta case from transparent optics much sooner than it is from VR style optics. Now, the one thing that could change that is holographic optics, but that's even further away. Like we're not even at the stage of like having a prototype of. I've tried a lot of holographic optic systems, and I mean this with the greatest respect to the researchers that have shown me them, but they all kind of suck. Like they all, none of them are ready for a product. And I think it's really, really important research, and these are very intelligent people doing important research that I'm sure will pan out in the 2040s, but it's not something we need to think about anytime soon.
2040s.
I'm talking about true holographics here, just to be clear, not like the way that some people overuse that term.
I liked Jack's comment here that AR is for the streets and VR is for the sheets.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a pretty good one there. I'm going to think about that one a while. And I'm thinking back to, even though you convinced me with the little map, the mini map, and in Google's defense, right? Okay, so I went and saw the Samsung headset, right, last year. They walked me into another room where they showed me a bunch of their optics for AR glasses, and they showed me a mini map exactly like David described. And I wanted to take it outside right then. Like I wanted to do a football run and just, shove people out of the way and take it outside because it was that cool to have that ability. But I'm still going to argue that I want that mini map more or less to point me back to my VR headset. Like ultimately the map is to take me to my VR headset so that I can have full immersion. All right, let's move on from this and talk about Immersed. Oh goodness. Oh no, we're going to talk about Immersed.
Yeah. Look, I just want to recap that last bit on saying I agree with you that when you get home, you will take your AR glasses and put them in their case or their dock or whatever and pick up your mixed reality headset or whatever the hell you want to call it. But it's just about what you do outdoors. We disagree. But let's indeed talk about Immersed. And actually, interestingly, we talk about the kind of straps that are needed and whether you have something in the back of your head or not. You may have seen Immersed as a pair of Oakleys. But here on screen, you see what it actually looks like with its actual strap. That's a quote from the founder, that is designed to make it comfortable for sustained periods. So this is what it looks like when you're actually wanting to use this thing for more than just a 15-minute demo. And yes, this goes to an external battery. This is also another headset that uses that. So where do we even want to start here? So Immersed Visor is a very ambitious project from a startup. The startup has been making a product that a lot of Quest users love. It's an Immersed app on Quest that did this idea of letting you extend your PC into VR and MR and spawn extra virtual monitors before the big players, right? Before you could do this in Horizon Workrooms, before you could even do this in Guy Godin's virtual desktop, Immersed had this, literally taking your laptop with a 13-inch screen and turning it into a 5-screen system using software. And that was impressive. And you have a lot of Quest owners today who really enjoy using Immersed for these sort of situations. And you kind of have to commend them for that. But at some point, Immersed said, these Quest headsets are designed for general use, to be low cost, for gaming. They're not ergonomically optimized for our use case for virtual screens. We've been talking about this, how Apple Vision Pro is too heavy, how Samsung headset might be there, but we don't know yet. So Immersed said, we want to build a headset that is just for that. This headset does not support gaming. It doesn't connect to SteamVR. It's not that kind of headset. If that's what you care about, this isn't for you. This is specifically designed for virtual screens. Now, originally, it was supposed to just directly be powered by your PC, but over time, they actually changed it to be standalone in a sense that the tracking runs on board, the hand tracking runs on board, their operating system that lets you move windows around runs on board, eye tracking, all of that runs on board, but it's still just in service of bringing your PC into virtual space. And so that's obviously remarkably ambitious for a startup that wants to sell this thing for just over $1,000. Remember how we were talking about how no other headset with 4K micro OLED displays, which this thing has even gone under $2,000. And even the PC-only headsets that are just, essentially dumb displays that use your SteamVR tracking, like Shift-All's Megane X, are $2,000. So the red flags on this startup is that they want to somehow sell you a fully standalone headset with, well, I guess fully is not the right word, but a standalone headset from a hardware perspective with 4K micro OLED displays. Sorry, this has been a long podcast. For just over $1,000. And they originally claimed that they were going to start shipping this thing right after a October launch event, which we attended and obviously wrote an article about. Here's me kind of wearing the thing without its real strap. So this is just designed for kind of demos and cool pictures, I guess. And so that didn't happen. And at the time, the founder of Immersed, Ranji Bijoy, told me that general pre-orders wouldn't ship until April at the earliest. So that's next month. Now, the news here today, and why we're talking about this, is that their timeline has slipped further. So they now say that a handful of Founders Edition units are already out in the wild, and they expect to ship the rest of the Founders Edition, this very limited edition first run, on the order of weeks, not quarters. That's their direct quote. But what about general pre-orders? Well, they say that these are going to be fulfilled in the following quarters, which the startup says means after summer. So the second half of this year, essentially. They claim that this delay is because of a few small but important refinements needed to achieve the level of performance we're targeting, such as enhancing the buttons, head strap, nose piece, and soft materials. Now, should point out the context that this is a very controversial startup. People have wide-ranging opinions. Some people call it an outright scam. When I went to see this headset, this is a non-functional prototype. I got to try a barely functional prototype for a couple of seconds that was basically just outputting a still image to the 4K OLED micro displays. So I see it is a real, it's a real device, as what I saw. But what kind of real use did it have? Ian, very shortly after, got to try. I'll see if I can bring up the image. Maybe you can find it. Ian got to try this, but it worked better. But it was very laggy and had to be cooled by a iced coffee, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And in the meantime, they've shown some videos of this thing working, where they're kind of showing the headset running alongside like a screen mirror of their operating system. They've given it to a handful of kind of, I would say, friends of the company, not exactly objective observers, and they've kind of said that this thing works. I actually don't question that this is real hardware. Here we go. Here's it without the detachable front plate. What I do question is, can they actually ship this thing while not going broke? The biggest problem with a lot of these startups is that they all think they're going to be the cool cat by pricing so much lower than what you think they should have to price it. Lynx made the same mistake. They tried to price it Quest pricing originally, and now today it's like what $1,500 or $1,800 or something like that from back in their original promise. The company almost went bust because of this. Immersed is obviously trying to do this again, like $1,100, $1,200. They have a weird like a subscription system, but this is basically what it equates to. My personal view on this is that they should have just been honest and said this is going to be a $2,000, $3,000 headset and sold it for that. And I think that would probably have made a lot of their problems a lot easier. They also probably should have been honest about timelines. We'll have to see. I'm very skeptical that they're going to ship this thing without going broke.
Yeah, I did my best Judge Dredd impression here because I was under camera the entire time that I was doing this demo. So they were filming me for their own purposes while I was doing this demo. And so I wasn't going to give them a smile as I experienced quite a bit of lag in my visuals. But, you know, to the point of the history that we were able to bring you, like, this is all last year reporting. This is reporting that David and I teamed up to basically do. David flew halfway around the world on Immersed dime to go and see this when they initially showed it, and then he saw nothing, right? Like he got on a huge, he flew through the physical world to go see this thing, and it was essentially non-functional. And then we wanted to give them every chance they possibly could, so we went and saw the demo. I didn't saw the demo right after MetaConnect, and it was more functional than when David saw it, but it was still a really, really long way to go. So it is real hardware. It exists. But from then to now, even before that reporting, we have cautioned our entire audience to not pre-order this until we actually try a functional demo. We actually see them fulfill more of what they say they're going to do. And in fact, right before we came in here, we had a lengthy email dropped into our inbox from someone out there in the community who's been watching Immersed very, very closely with comments on just how people are getting ejected from their Discord or from their subreddit for bringing up concerns. And there's this thing in technology or in startups, fake it till you make it. I've heard this term given a lot. Ultimately, you could argue our entire previous conversation about Orion is a fake it till you make it situation, right? It's they want us to believe they can do it so that they can do it. And I can see Renji and Immersed following that sort of model. That's what it feels like to me. And we've recommended against putting your dollars into that effort for a very, very long time here. I don't know when we first made that recommendation, but it was even before these demos.
Oh, yeah, it was from the start. We said, don't pre-order this thing, wait till it actually comes out. And I think you're spot on. Fake it till you make it is the vibe I get from Immersed. I think they're hoping that they can just fake it until they make it, that everything will just work out, that the hype and kind of excitement that they can generate will bring in the kind of funding that will make everything work out in the end. That's the vibe I get. Jake Green asked an interesting question. Why is the Deckard price rumored to be $1,200 plausible, but Immersed price not, since we're thinking micro OLED for both? Similar price, similar BOM. So firstly, we don't actually know whether Deckard will have 4K per eye micro OLED. It's possible it could be like the big screen beyond panels, right? 2.5K. They could be using like a 3K LCD or something like that. We don't know Deckard's specs. But even let's assume that Valve Deckard is going to use 4K per eye micro OLED. The difference is that rumor suggested that Valve was going to sell at at cost or a loss, right? Which Valve can do because Valve is $1 billion company. You don't hear this said often, but Valve is $1 billion company. Gabe Newell is a billionaire, and he owns multiple yachts reportedly. So he can do that and finance this with the enormous Scrooge McDuck level pile of money that he's getting from Steam. Immersed can't. It's a startup. It has to make a profit, right? It can coast along on investor money for a while, but at some point they have to actually make a profitable product. And, you know, that's the difference. A startup has to make money. It can't subsidize its first product unless it's got enormous and unwavering investor support.
There's a reason Valve time is a thing, right? It's because of that $1 billion revenue stream that you all are paying for every time you buy a Steam game. Exactly the Scrooge McDuck levels. What a beautiful quote. Wow. Yeah, it's already resounding in our audience here, the yachts and all that stuff. But point being, right, that's any time that a startup doesn't ship on time, if you know, it is death, right? Like it's burn rate. You're running through a cash flow. You're running through your hoard of cash over here, and the only way the cash hoard gets any bigger is if you go back to your investors and go, please give me a little bit more, right? And more than likely they're going to say no. And that's why you end up with very bad outcomes when you support small companies like that, even though we have reported on these very small companies at their very outset to try to give them the benefit of the doubt, so to speak. But the benefit of the doubt here is meeting with fake it till you make it vibe that we're all getting out of all the communications.
Yeah. Just for our viewers here, we're showing some images of Immersed is shown, through the lens shots, showing that, their operating system does have a hand tracking menu, showing like how hand tracking and eye tracking can be used to position virtual screens. Like, we want to be clear that this is not like some sort of made up hardware, but what we have been saying about hardware startups for years now, and this is just the reality. The difference between making a functional prototype or even 10 functional prototypes and affordably, profitably mass producing that device to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people, these things are so unrelated. Like, they are not even in the same realm. Demonstrating the ability to do one doesn't even indicate your ability to do the other. That's what I need to make so clear. So even if a startup shows you that they have made the device, it does everything, it's the best thing in the world, that's irrelevant. What matters is, can you mass produce it with enough profit to not go bust? And again, it's just so frustrating that so many companies make the same mistake. And if you are a hardware company right now that is thinking of, trying to enter this space, obviously we support the idea, and I hope you do well. But if your idea is that you want to undercut the pricing of the big players, you're probably making a mistake if you're just a new startup. Differentiate yourself on appealing to a niche and charging a price that the people in that niche are willing to pay over the low cost mass market devices. Don't try to just undercut on price, because then if you run out of investor money, you can't back that up with the money you're getting from your customers.
See, like I want to say, if Guy Godin is still out there in the comments, like one of the questions for him over the years was like, why don't you just go make a dongle for virtual desktop and try to sell it? And I think the response is just, no, I don't want to. Right? And that's a reasonable response from a software developer, right? To not want to go make hardware because of how different it is and how hard it is and the cost structure and all of those things. Yep, Gigo, not worth it. So we will see. We will try to do more reporting on Immersed as soon as we've got it. As indicated, right? Bring us any information you have about them and about your interactions with them. You can email tips@uploadvr.com. We see all those emails. We had an email come in earlier in this show, which came at the request of an audience member. Someone out there said they were watching us from Antarctica. I received an email showing that image here because I got our inbox here. So like we've broken news previously on this show straight from our tips inbox, and it's kind of wild that that's where we are in this phase. But I just want to reiterate that like our community is absolutely critical to us being able to report on a lot of the things happening out there. We were able to report our big Quest to Horizon story with Henry Stockdale. Talking to dozens of developers out there because we had a community. Yeah, how cool is this, David?
Yeah, this is incredible. I really a joke, but we really are being watched from Antarctica. That is truly incredible. Thank you for
Yeah.
watching us from there. I really want to go to Antarctica one day. That's like my travel bucket list place, you know.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, definitely. That would be great. And so, well, now I've got a list, David. Now I've got a list of places I want to see us being watched from, and it includes a plane, a submarine, and maybe even the space station. But this is now you watching us in our in Antarctica have now made my dreams even that much larger, and we are being watched on all the continents. That's wild. Really, really neat.
okay, are we ready to talk about that VR chat update that you
And
reported on?
yeah, so this is the latest beta update to VRChat now has drone cameras as well as dolly cams. And what was the third feature?
Desktop webcam mode.
Yeah, desktop webcam mode. So you can point a webcam at you over here. This is an example video sent to me by Tupper, or a sample photo sent to me by Tupper on desktop mode. But you can see you've got your standard drone controls here on a little handheld type thing. And here's the drone floating over here. You've got a bunch of drone commands here. Uh, it's a wildly impressive tool that's being tested. You got to be a member of the VRChat Plus subscription program to access some of these latest features. Tupper was pointing out that if you use the desktop webcam mode, you're getting animated facial expressions that look very, very close to what you can get out of fully tracked upper body on some of the headsets out there. So just you can see VRChat here being at the very forefront of social connection in VR and even extending outside of VR in fantastic ways. As I was looking at this or talking about it, I found out about a flight sim community that exists inside of VRChat, and they're holding like 4v4 flight matches, dog fights, and they're incredible. The quality of the productions that they're putting into these things, even though it's all in VRChat, and it's the worlds are fairly simplistic. They've got 8 cams or 4 cams from all these different flight people going around here. And it's very easy to imagine that these benefits, these latest benefits like the dolly cam and the drone cam, making watching sporting events like that inside of VRChat even better, right? How cool would it be to have 4 camera drones following around 4 jets and providing you aerial views of those jets as they're flying around a VRChat? Amazingly cool stuff being done by VRChat over there. And yeah, so you can find these features, the dolly cam. I saw some of the examples of the dolly cam. If you aren't familiar with what a dolly cam is, you basically put a rail down on a movie set or out in public, and then you run the camera along the rail, and you get this beautiful tracking shot. Lots of cameras today have stabilization, image stabilization that provides that effect, but it's not quite as that incredibly cinematic shots that way. Um, yeah, I think that's it really on this. We'll see if these features make it into the full beta, really, or the full release after beta. But this opens up a lot of possibilities for filmmakers. We've had Joe Hunting in our studio here. He was the one who made the We Met in Virtual Reality movie that got picked up by HBO. These tools are going to change those types of movies inside of VRChat in a very soon. David, have you ever seen, this is off topic, but have you ever seen the style transfer videos done by people who are filming stuff in Red Dead Redemption 2?
Yes, I know what you're trying to. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, incredibly wild stuff. If you go, I don't know what would be the key terms for people to search out there to find those videos.
I guess what you just said, right? Red Dead
Yeah.
Redemption 2 style transfer.
Yeah, so you take footage from Red Dead Redemption and then you put it through a AI generator, and what you end up with is footage that looks photorealistic. It looks like it was actually shot by like a camera on the person's head and not produced by an AI bot. I'm really curious about whether VRChat gets there, right? If these tools help you do the same thing with VRChat, it would be pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's really great what they're giving to creators here. I think it really does put the other platforms to shame. Horizon Worlds kind of has like some selfie camera stuff that you can reposition, but it's nothing like this. And yeah, I think, VRChat's going to remain the premier place for this kind of content for a long time.
Yeah, people are yo-yo out there saying VR Dolly zooms are going to be crazy. I can't wait to see someone start trying to recreate Hollywood movies with those zoom tricks, with those various camera tricks, and it really feels right because they're actually doing it in camera, so to speak, right? Like you can do it with special effects, but there's like you think of that shot of Jaws when he knows that the shark is in the water and it zooms in on his face. That's a really, and there's another shot in Poltergeist when the person is running down the hallway and the hallway elongates as she's running down it. Those types of things start becoming within reach with these in-game camera tools. And like, how cool would that be if people start using that to great effect? All right, let's move on here. We've got what, 3 more stores, 4 more, 5 more stores. What the heck?
And we got to really, that's why we got to avoid getting bogged down in future,
go, David.
I guess. Let's just talk about visionOS 3. So this isn't a lot of detail here. It's just that Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who is a very accurate source about Apple's future plans, reported a lot of the details of Apple Vision Pro in advance accurately, says that he is told that visionOS 3 will be a feature-packed release. So we don't have any specifics of what visionOS 3 might include, but visionOS 2 was a pretty big update, so I imagine we'll see a lot of other stuff. So, since releasing Vision Pro, there is this kind of public perception that Apple's forgotten about it and ignored it, but any visionOS headset owner, any Apple Vision Pro owner, or any UploadVR reader will know that that's not true at all, that Apple has been regularly updating the system. So, a few months after release in April, it got those spatial personas, which are like a very primitive version of the idea of codec avatars that we talk about. So, 3-dimensional, realistic style avatars based on a 3D scan of your face that you perform using the headset. In September, we got visionOS 2, which brought hand gestures for opening the main menu and control center, the ability to turn any photo into a spatial photo, improved hand tracking and scene understanding, WebXR by default in Safari, the ability to AirPlay your iPhone and iPad to a window, Bora Bora virtual environment, the ability to see your physical keyboard, mouse support, guest user improvements, static 3D object tracking, train support for travel mode, live captions, new developer features, and raw camera access for enterprise. So many things. Then in visionOS 2.2 in December, we got wide and ultra-wide mode for Mac Virtual Display. That ultra-wide mode is probably the most significant update to Vision Pro yet for Mac users. It is incredible to be able to turn your laptop's 13-inch screen into a giant ultra-wide, and that can be used for your video or audio editing software to see the entire timeline at once. It can be used for games like Stardew Valley to see a huge portion of the screen. That's incredible that you can get an ultra-wide display portably. The next significant update is going to be visionOS 2.4 in April. Apple Intelligence, Spatial Gallery app, iPhone app for remote installs, better guest mode driven by your iPhone. All this to say, we have high hopes for visionOS 3, and I have some personal kind of big hopes I hope to see. One of them is the ability to bring up 2D windows inside fully immersive apps that aren't in the shared space. Something that Ian loves on Quest, Horizon OS. It isn't possible on Vision Pro today. It would be a huge game changer. But caveat, it is possible on Vision OS for one use case. If you have developer mode enabled, you can bring up Mac Virtual Display. That's designed to help with real-time development. But give everyone that ability for every window. Do it, Apple. It's worth it. Do it.
Yeah, James O'Loughlin is an estimate of very interesting. I want you to look at James' numbers that he just dropped in there and think about the success numbers that he's trying. See if his math works for you there, and if we can repeat it. It's very interesting.
Yeah, he's suggesting that because Vision Pro is so much higher priced, that it has actually brought in more revenue for Apple than the Ray-Ban Meta glasses has for Meta and EssilorLuxottica. And yeah, that makes sense, right? And also think about all the accessories for Vision Pro and the fact that Vision Pro also serves content that Apple gets a 30% cutoff, right? Any app you buy, movies you purchase and rent. The one thing I would say is that Apple has probably spent a lot more to develop Vision Pro than Meta did to develop the Ray-Ban glasses. So people often talk about Meta Reality Labs spending $100 billion on AR, VR, XR, everything over the past 10 years. Well, Apple has reportedly spent on the order of 20 to 30 billion to develop Vision Pro. So, yes, Apple Vision Pro has brought in more revenue for Apple than Ray-Ban Meta glasses have brought in. However, I would say probably they spent an order of magnitude more developing it too.
So in the event that there's anyone at Apple watching us who might be working on visionOS or Vision Pro, the feature I would like is to use my iPhone as a microphone for a spatial video, as an external microphone. So I'd like to take my iPhone and put it over there near the subject, and then I sit back and they're looking at me as I do a spatial interview, and I get a slightly better recording because the iPhone is closer to the person. So I'd
They
like
already
that feature.
do support that for iPads and iPhones, don't they? They have like a camera, what is it called, remote camera app or something where you can use your iPhone.
I can't remember. It's like desk cam, or I can't remember, but there is a remote cam feature that, like, if I can easily change my FaceTime cam to one of those. I'd love that for the microphone. And there's lots of features out there, and I'm just going to throw this out there, right? We don't have Metallica on the lineup today, but I am going to go to a Metallica concert tomorrow with James in our audience, and we're gonna go watch we're gonna watch Metallica together, right? Like, how awesome is that?
Yeah, we probably should have had that in the lineup, but we have so much to talk about this week.
No,
this
right?
really is one of the most dense shows ever. Like, these are meaty topics.
It's the week before GDC, doesn't it? It makes sense ultimately, right? That it would be kind of this heavy of a news week.
But just for viewers wondering what you're talking about with the Metallica concert, there is a Metallica Apple Immersive Concert Experience releasing on Vision Pro tomorrow. It is going to have 3 songs performed during the band's current world tour. And Apple says they built like a custom stage with a bunch of different Apple immersive video cameras. You talk about all those camera features from VRChat. Well, they are rigging real life physical immersive cameras. They're doing Dolly cam. They're doing all of these different views. And the crazy thing is, so there's 3 songs in this experience, but they're going to demo one of the songs at Apple stores. So if you have an Apple store near you, from tomorrow, you can book in on Apple's website and go and try this out on a Vision Pro. If you're a Metallica fan, do it. If you're even just a music fan, do it. They also demoed, The Weeknd's Open Heart Apple immersive music video, which is one of my favorite pieces of content on Apple Vision Pro. Really well done. Incredible immersive video. Like, the visuals even are just incredible in this, especially near the end. I don't know if they're still demoing this, but they were at the time it came out. So it's really cool that, like, obviously a lot of people's reaction is, I don't have a $3,500 headset. And sure, great point. 100%. I get it. It's a ridiculous amount of money for a headset. But if you really want to go demo this and see the kind of content that you might get on a future cheaper Apple headset or another company's headset, go try this out at an Apple store.
Yeah, when I did my travel to Austin and back, it became so much easier to talk to these folks that I would meet on my journey about VR. It's like every one of them, the recommendation was the same: get to an Apple store and do a demo, and then go check out the Meta Quest.
Yeah. So there's one tangent in the comments I want to correct. James O'Loughlin has asked, how much did it cost Meta to develop all the quests? And Clayman has said 80 billion, says Google. And then you have other people kind of responding to that going, oof, that's a lot. That is not correct. That is an often misreported statistic that is nonsense. So Meta has spent over 80 billion on Reality Labs as an entire venture, the AR/XR division, from 2014 to today. But the majority of that spending has been on AR glasses, the Orion project, right? Trying to build Orion. I criticize Orion. I'm going to need to plug in a battery here, which is remarkable because I already had a battery. So this has gone through the headset battery and my external battery. So I need to plug in yet another battery. But I often criticize Orion for the fact that it is, going to be almost impossible to manufacture, that it's going to take a long time for it to come into being. But as a piece of hardware, as a piece of technology, it is a marvel. Like, they have willed something out of science fiction that is truly, truly remarkable. And it cost them on the order of 50 or 60 billion to do that, right? So we don't know how much Quest cost of that. I would guess it's roughly, 30 or 20 or 30 billion dollars, the same it actually took Apple to develop Vision Pro. So that's a big change of narrative from what you might have heard in public. But I want to stress that again. The majority, as in over 50% of Meta's spending on Reality Labs has been on AR glasses, not Quest.
Yeah, I appreciate Mestora's comment here. Well, if they can only make 600K of Apple Vision Pros a year and they sold over 400,000 and they expected that, I don't call a flop. I appreciate you. You are, we reached you with that message. Now please spread it around so other people can push back at the misinformation out there about the fact that VR is taking over the world. It's just being called by any other name that everyone can come up with because it's too dystopian to say that VR is taking over the world. All right, and then Clay. Oh no, I'm the misinfo guy now. I appreciate you, Clay. I appreciate you responding to David that way. I appreciate that our audience always tries to surface better information over the course of our conversation. Yeah, we don't.
That is widely reported wrong, right? Like the one thing I LL making a joke. Horizon Worlds cost 80 billion. Yeah. On the tier of misinformation, you have like Quest cost 80 billion and then Horizon Worlds cost 80 billion. Horizon Worlds didn't cost anywhere near that, to be clear. Meta is doing a lot of like fundamental R&D on the scale of the Manhattan Project. And that sounds crazy to say, but like Meta Reality Labs is the 21st Century Bell Labs. They are doing research that is like trying to, some of this is shipped, right? Some of the computer vision stuff you see in Quest, the pancake lenses you see in Quest 3, the Meta audio technology you see in their audio SDK. All of this stuff came from like fundamental research. But like most of it still hasn't. Okay, so like a lot of this stuff is spending on stuff that either will never leave the lab or hasn't left the lab yet. But like if you look at what they're hiring for, even go at a Reality Labs like careers and look at their hiring, like they're like fundamental optics science, material science, like advanced metamaterial engineering, fundamental computer vision research, like low level silicon. Like they are. You could argue that it's wasted, but you could also argue that if they find even one little gem in there, it could be worth the entire venture.
What's fascinating is that David's digging into the nuance there of it, where at the end of the day, Meta does tend to ship A/B tests and then quickly kill off one of the two routes. So they're actually so where other companies like Apple would typically not ship the A/B test, they ship the one that they selected. Meta actually does waste a lot of money by shipping that way, but the end goal is still the same, to David's point, right? Like, what if they get something really nuggety out of that? And ultimately, that's the quest. They got the nugget, and they've been honing in on it. Now they can use that as the launch pad to the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, before Quest, right? Like a couple of years before Quest, if you ask a lot of people in the computer vision industry, like, could you do this quality of tracking on a smartphone chip in like real time while rendering VR and doing controller tracking and all that? Like, they would have said no. Like, a lot of people did at the time. I know, because I was reading like what is the industry consensus on this, and even people in Meta thought that Quest was impossible. And then they get there, a fully standalone device with high quality, really, really high quality, 6DoF head tracking and controller tracking with a software update. They bring hand tracking on a Snapdragon 835, right? The kind of thing that ran in 2017 Android phones, that kind of chip. They have hand tracking running. Then, you get Quest 3 coming out at a $500 device that, without having actual hardware level depth sensing, is, while also running a full VR compositor, doing full room meshing and a depth sensing, and then also inside out upper body tracking. No other company has a headset that does inside out upper body tracking today. Nor are there any other headsets that, without using a hardware level depth sensor, give you a scene mesh, right? All like other headsets did this, but they did it by hardware. So like there is like a bunch of stuff that Meta has done that genuinely is innovative and comes out of this R&D. And look at the Quest 3's lenses, right? Like I have tried so many headsets. I've tried headsets that are $10,000. There is no better lens in any shipping headset than Quest 3's lenses. They are a remarkable work of optics engineering. And like you could go back 5 years and see how many, Meta job positions there were for like fundamental optics physics research. Like, how do you solve this problem? This field that most people think has been stagnant, right? Surely optics is solved. Turns out, no. If you throw billions of dollars at this, you actually can do things that people didn't think were possible, for example.
Yep, and what's funny is we're about to switch to our last subject before the final section, which is the wireless PCVR news. So we're still getting to that. I encourage you to hit the like button because it's going to be a big discussion. And honestly, it feels like we're burrowing to the core of the VR market here through this, the course of this episode. So it's going to be juicy with these last three subjects as we talk about that. But yeah, I would love to see our numbers go back up near the end of this show to where they were near the beginning of the show and before our bugs here. And thank you all for tuning in and for all of our members out there for the support of our work over the long term. Thank you so much. Yeah, Google now. Now we're going to talk about Google and yeah. What's their strategy here, David? Because I can't. We talk about we just spent an hour probably of this show talking about Meta and whether it should be focused on AR or VR, and here's Google like buying another. Didn't they already buy eye tracking companies like 8 years ago? Like for their last build up? I don't know. Like,
yeah, I can't recall if they did, but yeah. So this is Google acquiring a eye tracking startup, a very promising one. So, yeah, this is getting a very long show. So many of these topics are so deep. My brain's almost stopped being working. But you'll recall last week on the show with Kyle, we talked about that paused eye tracking add-on for Quest 3 that didn't use cameras for eye tracking. This is another company that doesn't use cameras for eye tracking. So cameras work for eye tracking. You put little cameras in on the edges of the lenses that are looking at your eyes, and you illuminate them with you illuminate your eyes with infrared, and then the cameras can clearly see what your eyes are doing, and they run computer vision every frame to get like what is the shape and position of your pupil. Okay, that's how Apple Vision Pro works. It's how PlayStation VR 2 works. It's how HTC Vive Pro Eye works, how Vive Pro Focus Vision works. All of these headsets, Samsung's upcoming headset, all of these headsets, it's how Quest Pro worked. Cameras track your eyes using computer vision. The problem is that that's from an energy and performance perspective quite expensive, right? You're constantly sampling either one or two cameras per eye at quite a high refresh rate. You're running a computer vision algorithm constantly. And that's fine, I guess, for headsets. It's especially fine for PlayStation VR 2, where you're drawing power from the mains. Who cares at that point about a few watts? Doesn't matter. But what if you want to do really slim and light headsets or low cost headsets or glasses? How do you do eye tracking in that with the same approach? It's not as practical. So AdHoc is another company that's using a photosensor approach. So the idea is that these approaches shine IR light on your eyes and then use an array of simple photosensors to measure the reflection of that IR off different parts of your eye. And because different parts of your eye reflect it differently, they can use a very fancy algorithm to figure out where is your eye actually facing relative to these photosensors. So AdHoc's technology is actually slightly different than that. That's how it works in principle. They use a MEMS micro mirror, basically a tiny electrically actuated mirror to rapidly sweep a beam of IR light over your eye. So sweep, 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 and then they measure the reflection in the same way. So it's even more efficient than Insight's approach, and it could run at an even lower power in something like AR glasses. So remember that Insight has paused their Quest 3 add-on because they want to focus on glasses. So AdHoc says that its eye tracking technology runs at 250 hertz tethered or 250 hertz untethered or 500 hertz tethered with a latency of 4 milliseconds. But as with Lumi, the trade-off of this kind of less expensive eye tracking is accuracy. So Lumi from Insight claimed about 2 degrees of accuracy. This one claims 1 degrees. In contrast, the accuracy of camera-based eye tracking is measured in tenths of a degree. So this may make it challenging for this kind of eye tracking to actually work for the gaze and pinch interaction system that Vision Pro uses, that Samsung is going to introduce in Android XR with Google. This is their entire sensor, right? This is the thing you could put onto a headset or glasses and boom, you have eye tracking. But it could still be used for foveated rendering. It still could be used for AR glasses if you have like a more simplified, larger interface, because let's not go to a rabbit hole, but AR glasses will likely run operating systems that are different than headsets. So there will be a version of Android XR on glasses that likely is different in terms of the same difference that you might have between a phone and a smartwatch, where they're designed for different form factors. The point I'm trying to make is a lot cheaper, a lot more efficient, but without the same accuracy, they're going to have to be trade-offs for now. But maybe with inside Google, they can get this up to the accuracy of camera-based eye tracking over time. Who knows?
That was my battery dropping onto the floor. If you all heard that, as I'm going back down below 15%. I got myself up to 15% from 3% over the last bit, but the show must go on, so I'm gonna have to go get more battery. We're up to 180, so we're nearly up to over the 200 number as we get ready to talk about this last section. Yeah, I people really responding to this, to your description there of the tech. I really liked, what was it? There was one comment here. People like watching our long streams and suggesting that we take an intermission that's a good idea at an hour and a half. If we do this again, corporates comment, just sticks to your contact lenses. I like that, right? It's a horrible idea. I've seen it. It's nightmare fuel. You can find their video of someone who's done that, and it's not cool. All right. Are we ready to talk about the wireless PCVR news yet, David?
Yeah, let's move to that. I just want to recap this by saying I imagine Meta is researching this. I imagine Apple is researching this. I wonder if this kind of technology, cameraless eye tracking, is how we get eye tracking in Quest 4S, the cheaper version of Quest 4 that is expected to launch alongside it. I wonder if that's something that Meta decides, because again, it's just cheaper and easier to integrate in a headset than cameras. We'll have to see. I'm really optimistic about how this could bring eye tracking to every headset and glasses at every price point. But can they figure it out at the right accuracy?
Yeah, people in the comments thinking about the ad flow that might come with eye tracking of that magnitude, right? And I think it's really interesting to think Google has such a built-in business amongst all their 2D ad developer, all their 2D app developers, to try to advertise to VR users, right? Like, that's going to be such a big vertical of trying to get VR users to use your 2D apps over on Android XR. That's just all Google needs to do is flip a switch to turn that on.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, for lack of a better word, hysteria, because it hasn't come to pan yet. But to be fair, that's not a fair word, about concerns of Meta putting ads in VR and AR and being the IOI. But I would make a prediction that Google is the first company to do it. Actually, I don't think that Meta will be the first. I think Google will do it, and then Meta will follow.
Well, I love that. And the problem is, right, when ads, my favorite spot to go into VR right now is the moon in an Apple Vision Pro. I set it to the moon. I've got quiet landscape. And as far as the eye can see, all I see is the lunar landscape. And the whole thing is like, how does an ad reach me there? If my purpose is if the benefit of this is focus, ads detract from that, even though it is such a big opportunity for money making.
Subscribe to Apple TV Plus now.
Yep, that's the point. Yeah,
the famous one they put in the iPhone settings, didn't they?
Oh yeah. Ooh. All right.
The company that everyone says, Apple's not going to do ads, and I mean, I don't use an iPhone, but I did see it on my iPad. Actually, I did go into the settings once and see an ad for Apple TV Plus in the settings. Imagine if Meta put an ad in the settings for Quest Plus. Well, I don't know if they have. Maybe let us know if you have seen an ad for Quest Plus in the Quest settings, in case I say that and they have. But I've never seen an ad in the Quest settings, for what it's worth.
Oh my
Um,
goodness. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about wireless PCVR news. We got the first one up here. I'm gonna have to go plug in my headset again here while David talks about
sure.
the Steam Link app, seemingly coming to Pico and HTC Vive standalone headsets.
Yeah, this one's pretty self-explanatory. I am connected to so many external batteries now. I'm not going to let this headset die. So uh, basically, as far back as November, VR enthusiast Luna discovered references to Pico in the Steam Link app for Quest. So this app, Steam Link, if you're not familiar, it lets you turn your Quest headset into a wireless PC VR headset, just like Virtual Desktop does, just like Quest Airlink does, but it connects directly to SteamVR. And what Luna actually noticed is that you can already sideload Steam Link for Quest on Pico and it runs. And that's the magic of OpenXR. We're talking about OpenXR earlier, that because these are OpenXR apps and these are Android-based headsets, it just works with a couple of quirks. But now um, more recently, Brad Lynch's Discord team of SteamVR data miners has found more references to Pico, including controller icons, and have found references to HTC Vive standalone headsets. So Vive Focus 3, Vive Focus Vision. And so this all suggests that Steam Link is not just going to be on the Quest Horizon store, it's also going to come to the Pico store and HTC Vive Focus Vision store. And this all relates to Valve's goal, for the way I see it, is to make it as easy and reliable as possible to use SteamVR regardless of what headset you're using. And that has been Valve's goal since 2016. They don't, and this would be relevant to what we're talking about soon. They don't care what hardware they're using. They care what store you're using. They want you on Steam, and they don't care if your headset is made by, as long as you use Steam. They don't care if your headset is made by Meta, Pico, HTC, Pimax, Big Screen, or Satan himself. As long as you use that headset on the Steam store.
Fantastic. All right. All right. Yeah. I mean, I missed some of that because I was disconnecting, but what a wonderful thing to come back in on. Um, yeah, it's a cash cow like world has never seen, and honestly, like when we think about the 80 billion misinformation number out there, how much research and development did Meta do on behalf of Valve and Apple at this point, and Google for that matter, right? Like ultimately, that those other companies should be very thankful for
Yeah.
for Meta proving out some ideas that needed to be proven out.
That's an interesting point. The first mover has to figure out how things work, and then everything seems obvious in hindsight, right? Oh, yeah, oh, it's so obvious. The next company that comes in, but the first mover who goes into a market and kind of tries to, grow it and do it at consumer scale is going to learn a lot of hard lessons. And I will criticize a lot of what Meta has done all day long on this podcast in my writing. So don't get me wrong, made a lot of mistakes, but at the same time, you do have to acknowledge that, the first person to walk into the minefield kind of has to get a little bit of credit for figuring out where the mines are, Like,
well, this is what happens. This is how this is unfiltered after 3 hours or 3.5 hours, wherever we are here. I liked, what was it? Guy's comment. He was talking about what he's like pointing out the small market for the also ran standalones outside of Quest. Why would Valve go in that direction? And I'm going to point out the controllers. I think that's the answer. I think it's more important that Valve align everyone around this singular controller interface across both flat games and VR games than it is to like nail the best PC VR experience, Index 2. It's actually more important that they don't let like Meta own some kind of inroad there into how people input on Steam.
I think I mean, yeah, that definitely could be right, but I think it's just that these are OpenXR headsets running Android. It already works, right? All they really have to do is add some controller models and kind of do some store stuff. I just don't think, like, the cost is low and the benefit is high. So even if they're small, if these were running completely different OSs, I don't think they would. But I think at this point, it's just like it's a matter of why not more than why.
First penguin in the water. I like that. Talking on about the minefield analogy. You've sparked all their imaginations out there with your colorful commentary here. All right, are we ready to talk about them killing the D-Link VR air bridge?
Yes.
This is how do you feel right now, Guy? I'd like to know how you feel about this. I would like to read your comment out in response to this moment. All right.
Well, the question is, you just said them killing the D-Link Air VR Air Bridge. We don't know who them is, and I'll explain now. So, if you don't know what this is, it's a $100 dongle that Meta partnered with D-Link to release in 2022 in the Quest 2 era. The idea is that if you were using Airlink, but your home Wi-Fi network wasn't suitable for whatever reason. So that might mean that your router is the one that your ISP gave you 10, 15 years ago when it's 3 rooms down the hall and you've got 10 other people on the Wi-Fi network. Then your wireless VR isn't going to work for you. And for a lot of VR enthusiasts who have these really high-end routers and really great network setups, they'll wax lyrical about how great Virtual Desktop and Airlink and Steam is. But I speak to dozens of people who like every month, dozens of people every month who are asking me like, why isn't this working for me? Like I'm trying to use these tools on my Wi-Fi network and it's just a laggy mess. Whether it be any of the solutions, ALVR, Virtual Desktop, Steam Link. And so that's what these dongles are trying to solve. It takes your home Wi-Fi network out of the equation, whether it be signal issues by going through 3 brick walls to your old 15-year-old ISP router that's got duct tape on it, or whether it be that they're just like, you're living in a family of 8 with everyone trying to watch 4K movies at the same time and stream their own stuff from their PlayStation Portal. All of that doesn't matter if you create a direct point-to-point Wi-Fi connection between right beside your PC and your headset. So they're in the same room, short range, dedicated connection. That's the theory. The problem with the D-Link VR AirBridge was that it's only Wi-Fi 5 gigahertz. It doesn't have the new 6 gigahertz band, which is designed for really, really high bandwidth, sort of shorter range point-to-point connections with no signal interference. So it was obsolete, kind of, very soon after when Quest Pro and Quest 3 released with Wi-Fi 6E and 6 gigahertz. And so you could argue that like it was kind of flawed at launch. But the news here is that we were alerted by a commenter when we were covering the next topic, our final topic, that it doesn't even work anymore. The Windows 11 24H2 update, the big major update that released late last year, has rendered it inoperable. And I went and checked out and found that this is actually correct. It will throw an error, it won't work anymore. And so this is actually the same Windows 11 update that killed Windows MR headsets. Remember these? Remember the big Windows 11 update that killed them? The same update has killed the D-Link VR AirBridge. So I want to actually discuss 2 topics at once. I want to actually then bring us into the next topic and we discuss this all at once. So that brings us to the real news that we want to talk about, not this thing that some Quest 2 owners unfortunately bought, but Valve's upcoming product. According to that same data mining that was talking about Steam Link coming to Pico and HTC, this is from Brad Lynch's Discord team of data miners, Valve is working on a SteamVR Link dongle that would be USB and Wi-Fi 6E, 6 gigahertz, and in theory, based on the name and description and the hardware, would basically deliver on the promise of the VR AirBridge, but actually do it well and presumably be optimized for SteamVR, Steam Link, and maybe be like, integrated into the SteamVR UI. So this all works really, really seamlessly and well without needing to have Meta's PC software or anything like that, because D-Links did need Meta's software. So I really like the idea of this product. I think that VR enthusiasts really underappreciate how many people have shitty Wi-Fi networks that are never going to support PC VR well. And I think that a dedicated point-to-point connection like this can help a lot of people. And I'm really glad to see that Valve seemingly is doing it. And some of that data mining suggests that this thing could be coming pretty soon.
Yeah, so Guy took the opportunity to comment, and the comment was, I recommended people not to buy that piece of crap. I guess I was right. He did not use the word crap, though, in his in his comment. So I liked that one. He had the opportunity to say something because he was on the record at the time, really dealing with this being, I don't know, a competing way of connecting your headset to your PC. Yeah. Any other comments out there that you really want to respond to? And I saw Casey Chiefs just rejoined as a member. Thank you for your support in the past and now. Incredible to just see members join us live on the show always. Thank you.
So yeah, some people are pointing out that you can kind of do this yourself DIY. You can get a dedicated router that is just connected to your PC, and then you can set up like a Windows hotspot and work this out. And some VR enthusiasts do this, but I wouldn't exactly call this a kind of low friction, easy thing to do. I've done it before. It requires quite a bit of configuration. Windows updates can occasionally kind of break it, and the way the drivers change around. It can, you're adding an entire kind of router rather than just something that plugs into one USB port, and it doesn't really work well if you're bringing your laptop on the go. One thing that's great about dongles is if you're at a trade show and you want to demo wireless PC VR without having a big cable coming out of people's head, you can use one of these things. If you're like demoing something in a boardroom to investors, you can use this for wireless PC VR. It's the friction here. I think in the same way that again, coming back to what I said, Valve's goal is to make connecting to SteamVR easy and reliable regardless of your headset. With the Steam Link app, they did that, but with the same flaw of your Wi-Fi network. If they can make this like click and play, like one plug and play, just plug it in, SteamVR detects it, says you want to create a Wi-Fi network, you connect to that on your Quest, and everything, you connect in the Steam Link app, and everything just works. Everything just works. If they can do that, and it's 6 gigahertz, and it's a good price, it works with Quest, works with Pico, then I think this is going to be great. Now, we should point out the possibility that maybe this is only for Deckard. I think regardless of what happens, it's very likely that this comes in the box of Deckard, that this thing is in the box, you get your Deckard, maybe it doesn't even have a cable, maybe it does have a cable optionally, but this thing's there. But I think it would be crazy to not also support Quest headsets with this. And if you look at like everything that Valve's doing, it just seems very likely that they would be wanting to support any headset, because again, they don't care about you buying Deckard. They care about you being on Steam primarily.
Yeah, really interesting discussion. Last year, I walked out onto the AWE show floor with my Apple Vision Pro, and that point-to-point Wi-Fi connection that was basically letting me see my phone in VR instantly broke because of the wireless interference at that event. That's a very extreme example, but you can have even hiccups so that that holodeck that we will talk about on some future show, they have Airlink running over there, and they had Amanda Watson out there basically trying to improve the performance of this system on the fly while to make this experience great for multiple headsets all in the same location. At my home right now, my biggest problem really is the Wi-Fi, right? Like it's getting 4 different types of media back and forth across my home. And I'm appreciating, like, there's button presses for my controller, there's media and video that needs to get to my headset without any lag. And all of it is such a pain in the butt that could be improved with better Wi-Fi. But I like the commenter saying a high-end PC and a high-end router is like a double whammy of difficult, like you're decreasing the market for your product by requiring those 2 things to enjoy your experience. So
yeah, I mean, if they can do this $50, every Quest wireless PC VR player gets it, right? At 100, a bunch of them get it. I think this is this is I think this is going to be controversial, but this would be more impactful to more people than Deckard. Now, Deckard, I still think is going to be, cool and the bee's knees and all that. But like, if you talk about what will actually impact the most people and improve their PC VR experience the most, and potentially make wireless PC VR like a more viable thing. If this is sold on Steam, and it's like, you can see right there on Steam, compatible with the Quest 3S, you can go out and get a $300 headset and this $50 dongle and get really high quality Steam VR. I wonder if that grows SteamVR. I wonder if you see people going out and
Really
for
interesting
for
question.
PC VR more if they can see that they have a Valve endorsed wireless solution that works really well. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go here. My headset's gonna die, and I've got to cut off now.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much. That is a wonderful discussion. We've had an amazing discussion out with our audience. Thank you to David for this marathon with me. VR Gamer Dude Don Hopper out there watching us. We'll see you in the future next Thursday. It's going to be pretty crazy with GDC. Are we still doing next Thursday?
Yeah, we're still on. We're still on the same time. Thanks
All
so
right.
much, everyone.
We'll see you.